Hey guys. This is part 5 of What If Naruto went back in time but ended up in the wrong timeline. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 41. The village square was full to bursting. 3,000 square feet, and not an inch left of space left for people to move. Akatsuchi was beside her, and Iten on her other side, a buffer, however minor, between herself and the crowds. Was it truly warranted? Perhaps. Perhaps not. She couldn't be sure. She knew well enough, however, that people now whispered at her back, looked at her with open suspicion, quieted when she drew near. There was no open hostility, no violence, or even obvious sneers. But she suspected that was only by sheer grace of who her father was. The truth was plain for all to see. In her own home, she was now a pariah. She was the sympathizer, the prisoner. Perhaps even the enemy or the traitor. Even her father, who wanted so desperately to believe that she was innocent. To believe in her, couldn't bring himself to do so fully. He couldn't really be sure where her sympathies, her loyalties now lay. Especially now. She watched the space that had been cordoned off in the center of the square. A perfect, empty space where she could see over a dozen umbus strategically placed in and around the location, with most of them hidden by genjutsu, prepared to intercept any possible attack, suicidal or otherwise. They, above all the other ranks, had taken her grandfather's death hard. It was their duty to guard him after all. It was more than their kage that they'd lost. They viewed it as their own personal failure. She could understand. She'd been the one to argue, convince him to go with a smaller guard detail. Maybe if she hadn't said anything, there would have been enough of them there to save him. Maybe she wouldn't have gotten him killed. Hey! Akatsuchi nudged her, his elbow feeling like it was the size of a fist as it rubbed against her arm. She didn't turn to look at him. You okay? Fine. She tried to keep her tone neutral, but she was curt, clipped. Almost instantly she wanted to apologize. The last thing she wanted to do was alienate one of the few people who still regarded her as a friend. As someone trustworthy. Just thinking. She finally managed to say, in order to at least provide some kind of explanation. Yeah. He breathed, leaning back a bit as he crossed his arms. I don't blame ya. This is big. Big. That was one way to describe it, she supposed. She took a breath, letting the silence fall between them as the crowd murmured and meandered around them, waiting. Soon enough, the murmuring of the crowds bled into nothing, going silent as the event finally started. Her father made his way towards the elevated platform, escorted by a cadre of chunin that negotiated their way through the mass of people, making their way to the line of umbu guards that kept the people away from the center of the square. He was in his jounin vest and uniform, seemingly no different than any other day. He made it there first and stood alone on the cut stones, clasped his hands behind his back, and waited. Then the village elders came. Escorted just like he was, they lined up in front of him, 3 of them, one holding the hat, another the robes themselves. The last held a kunai blade. That was the one that stepped forward, standing just a hand's length away from her father. The man's face was stern, etched, lined and worn by decades. When he spoke, it was slow, an old voice that reminded her of the castellan of Kota's palace, strict and devoid of humor. By the powers of the laws that govern our village of Iwagakure no Sato, stand before me. He stared at her father like a judge presiding over his execution, looking at him as though he was somehow found wanting. He probably thought he wouldn't live to see the day he had to anoint a new kage after her grandfather. Maybe none of them really did. Anoki had been there since before she was born. It always seemed like he'd be there well after she was gone. Her father said nothing, merely stepped forward, his head bowed, and the old man reached forward, taking his hand and placing the kunai knife along the back of it. Do you consign yourself to serve your village above all others? I do so. Do you consign yourself to defend the integrity, power, and prestige of your village above all else? I do so. Do you consign to give your life, without hesitation in the face of death, to defend your village if it is so needed? Her father offered one more nod. I do so. Then, by the powers of the laws that govern our village of Iwagakure no Sato, as they were passed on to us from the days of our shodaime Tsuchikage, you, Katsuchi Ishikawa, have been deemed worthy of the burden of responsibility and are hereby named our Yondaime Tsuchikage. He sliced open the back of her father's hand. None shall find you wanting. The wound was deep, and it bled profusely. It would leave a lasting scar. Even so, he didn't flinch. She imagined her grandfather hadn't flinched when he got his own scar. The last two elders stepped forward, with the first holding out a single arm as her father removed his jounin vest, taking it from him before placing the kage robes over his shoulders. The kanji 4/4 emblazoned on the back. The hat came last. It cast a shadow over her father as it was placed, and all of a sudden it seemed like weight of the whole world sag over the man's shoulders. There were no cheers from the crowd. This was not a day of celebration. As her father bowed to the elders and turned to face what were now his subjects, not just his people, she saw that he agreed with the solemn silence. A quiet anger burning at his eyes. We did not strike the first blow, he said after a long moment, using some technique or other to amplify his voice enough to carry through the crowded village square. We have received wounds. Our blood has been drawn. He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. I promise you all now, that for every blow we have suffered, we will make our enemies suffer, tenfold. A few clapped, some with murmurs of muted agreement. If they come here we will kill them. If they hide in their forests we'll burn them out. If they run home we will follow them. With each declaration the agreements came a bit louder. With a bit more fervor. They struck the first blow. They cut us. They will rue that day. We will bleed them dry. She could feel it. Their bloodlust. Their rage. She'd heard stories of the last wars. Listened to the cautionary tales and accounts of horror. The old wars left wounds that scarred. They left their mark. This war, though, its wounds wouldn't scar. They would fester. Naruto didn't consider himself the smartest person in the world. Sakura and Sasuke had, rightly, called him an idiot on quite a few occasions in his past life, and even in this life Itachi had expressed a similar view at times despite his years of unique life experiences. Of course, Itachi didn't so much say it as just look at him with this flat, deadpan expression that dissuaded him of whatever idea he'd gotten in his head at the time. The ideas weren't that bad. But to digress, he didn't consider himself to be a genius of any kind. He was not, however, a complete idiot. And even to him, this mission stank to high heaven. Akane was a 6-year-old girl, barely out of the academy for 2 weeks, with almost zero combat capability at the moment, and was, arguably, the most high-priority target in Konoha bar no one. Not only was she as close to royalty as a ninja village could get, being the daughter of Tsunade, great-great-granddaughter of the Shodaime, but she was also the village's sole remaining Jinchuriki. So, what the fuck were they doing, going to a base right on the front line barely 10 minutes from the border? Just a day's ninja sprint away from a Wagakure itself. It made no sense, unless it was something intentional. Were they being used as bait on a hook? It's the only thing he could think of. And if they were, who exactly was Sarutobi looking to draw out? Who was the trap for? Han? If that was the case, he'd like to think they would have at least told him about this plan. And even then, he didn't think Han, or anyone else for that matter, was worth enough for Sarutobi to risk Tsunade and Orochimaru's collective wrath. Tsunade probably had the same suspicions of the mission. It was why she came to him. Warned him. But that was all they had, suspicions. They had no proof, and without that there wasn't much any of them could do. He didn't like it, not any of it. Though he didn't show that to any of his teammates. Instead, he smiled. Marching through the mud-caked quagmire the road had become. You know, if you guys had learned more elemental manipulation, you wouldn't be having these problems. In response, Sasuke, Sakura, and even Akane glared at him. His 3 students were soaked to the bone. The thick traveling cloaks they'd bought in the last town they'd passed by were sodden and freezing, with the rain coming down in sheets. He, on the other hand, was keeping himself relatively dry with a gossamer thin layer of wind manipulation that was buffeting the droplets of rain out and away from him like a fan. We don't have wind elements, Sakura pointed out. Excuses, excuses. He laughed as he felt her glare burning a hole through the back of his skull. In truth, he would have liked to spread out the effect to cover them as well. He certainly had enough chakra to do it. The problem was that it would give away their position if they were in some kind of danger. Elemental manipulation wasn't subtle. Even now, anyone within 100 feet could probably sense his chakra usage. Having them all huddle closer together so they all fit in the current effect of his technique was just asking for trouble. Ninja needed room to move quickly, not trip over each other if they had to scramble. So far, He hadn't sensed any kind of danger, even with his nature chakra sense, but that was no real guarantee. Itachi-chan, Kakashi, and Orochimaru could escape his detection if they really wanted to. They'd all done it before. The smart thing to do would be to set up camp and wait out the rainstorm under some shelter. But going on 4 days walking, the border outpost wasn't far now. He'd be glad to put his back to the thing personally. The sooner they left, the less things could go wrong, so he gave the order to push straight through. So far, to anyone that wasn't a ninja, or more specifically a sensor/pseudo-sensor ninja like himself due to his nature chakra, the signs of war were virtually non-existent. There was absolutely nothing that would indicate that there were battles being fought all around them. But he could feel it, the spikes and discharges of chakra in the far distance. It took effort, more concentration than he normally gave any one task, and even then, it was as quick and quiet as a distant spark of light that was rapidly snuffed out, but it was there. Small comforts that most of it was too far to be in immediate danger. But it didn't help put him any more at ease yet. He didn't like this mission at all. They marched forward, through the rain and the biting cold. It was hours after the ceremony when she was called to his office. The sun was beginning to set, allowing the ruins of the Kage Tower to cast a long, dark shadow over the village. The building they were utilizing now was an administrative building, with cold, thin halls, that made her feel claustrophobic as she moved through the traffic of assistants and paper pushers that were still working round the clock to recompile the records, repair the damage, and determine what exactly Konoha had stolen from them. When she made it to the office, she found her father there, dressed in robes that seemed so out of place on his shoulders, staring at the hat that sat on his lap. She had to clear her throat for him to move, seemingly snapping out of whatever reverie had gripped him before he looked at her. Kuratsuchi. He didn't greet her, didn't smile or nod. He sat up straighter in his seat, setting aside the hat before he sat properly at his desk, laced his hands together and faced her. There was no formality, no veneer of civility or small talk. The first words out of Katsuchi's mouth were, "I have a mission for you." And all she could think of in response was already? Yeah. Already. She had a sinking feeling in her gut, an inkling as to where exactly this was going. What this mission was going to demand of her. He reached into a drawer at the side of his desk, pulling out 2 familiar files. Overflowing and heavy with information. Information she'd provided just days ago. The names of Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Itachi stared up at her in dark red letters, a mass of bookmarks and notes taken on both of them. Our spies have confirmed that the mass illusion technique that caused the rout of our main force was conducted by these 2, he said. A tandem technique. Preliminary analysis indicates some kind of seal work as the most likely medium. Given the unknown nature of the technique, or known viable counters, you've decided that they need to be killed. She cut him off. And you want me to do it? For a second, an instant, he looked at her, and he resembled her grandfather so much, it was as if she was staring at a ghost. Face carved out of stone, deep lines that already seemed to age him. Make him more severe, cold, and he didn't flinch as he answered, staring her right in the eye. You know their abilities the best. They've proven too large of a threat to be left alive. No offensive campaign can ever survive if we have to exhaust ourselves hunting down illusions while the enemy rips us to pieces at the seams. He leaned forward where he sat, elbows resting on the table as he looked at her. No amount of data we give our operatives can replace experience. You have that. She did. Almost 7 years. She called them her friends. He straightened in his seat, seemingly taking a moment to fully settle into this, his new role, the role that had to order things like this, before he continued. Your first mission as a reinstated ninja of Iwagakure will be the elimination of Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Itachi. This is my order as your yandame. She looked to him, not having the strength to glare. Not even having the strength to muster up the barest hint of any feeling at all. After so many weeks and months of her life turning in on itself over and over again, she just felt drained. Her answer wasn't the surprising part. What was surprising was how little she could feel within herself as she said it. Mission accepted. When they finally found the border outpost, well after the sun had started to go down, leaving little more than the burning orange embers of the sunset to flicker behind the cloud cover in the sky, Naruto had to conclude that it really was a sad little thing. Stuffed into a tight corner of the forest, surrounded on 2 sides by the bluff of what could only by significant charity be called a cliff, a third side by a stream that poured out from said little cliff, and the fourth open to the forest itself, It consisted of little more than camouflage tents, under a canopy net that, with the help of some minor genjutsu, could pass off as foliage if viewed from any real distance. The most remarkable thing about it, however, was that it was filled with dead chunin. Dead Konoha chunin, to be specific. Sakura's horrified voice was the first one he heard. Oh God! She sounded like she was ready to puke, and he was surprised, pleasantly so, to find that she still had enough presence of mind to grab hold of Akane and turn her eyes away. He remembered the first time they'd found something like this in his first life, that she'd frozen, like he had during their first C rank. For Akane herself, the little girl seemed torn between stuffing her face into Sakura's stomach and staring at the dead bodies in morbid, horrified curiosity. Naruto didn't take any chances. Using his nature chakra to spread out his senses as far as they would go and forming 6 shadow clones to spread out onto a perimeter around himself and his team. I don't see the Jounin commander. Sasuke tried to sound composed, and did a good job of it, truth be told, though he too was looking a little green at the gills. He had a good eye too. You're right. I don't see any Jounin here either. He probably got away. He paused, squinting as he took a closer look at the bodies. They were dead by neck slices. No crushing earth jutsu or burning fire jutsu. Each of these men were just riddled with blade wounds. All instant kills too. He couldn't even see any damage to the area. No retaliatory techniques, not even a stray kunai. That meant stealth experts. At least Jounin, he would guess. All right. He breathed. Needless to say, we can't report to dead men, he said. We're leaving. Right, no dash. His statement was cut short as he had to duck beneath a shuriken that would have buried itself into his temple. Then, 6 men seemed to melt right out of the trees, surrounding the 4 young Konoha ninja. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Even standing in front of him, right in his face, Naruto couldn't feel their chakra signatures. It wasn't until the men each reached onto their chests and ripped off a chakra paper seal that he could feel their presence. Chakra suppressor seals. Good ones? Too good for IWA to just develop overnight and deploy so quick. No matter what Kuratsuchi had said, the 6 men didn't wear forehead protectors. There were next to no identifying markers. They wore black outfits, no vests, no ranking identifiers either. No way to know if these were Chunin or Jounin. Definitely not IWA. He was hoping they were Chunin. 6 Jounin to take on 1 Genin team was overkill, to say the least. Of course, an outpost of dead Chunin didn't exactly inspire confidence in that assessment. Behind him, Sasuke took a fighting stance, while Sakura drew a single kunai blade, still clutching at Akane. He formed a ram's seal, forming 5 clones to surround his students. The other 6 clones he'd made earlier were out. So he effectively had these 6 men surrounded with clones. He'd need to make that count. The Senju, one of them hissed, giving him his answer. Give her to us and the rest of you can leave. His answer was simple, holding no room for doubt that he meant every word. That's not going to happen. The 6 men drew their weapons. He had no other warning. The enemy ninja swarmed over them, attacking from a half-dozen different angles in a perfectly coordinated pincer movement. His clones rushed to defend Sasuke, Akane and Sakura, with only Sasuke moving to join the fight with a hasty fire jutsu as the other clones he had burst out of the tree line, buying them a brief enough respite for him to shout out an order. Run! None of them needed to be told twice, and with what was practically a unanimous about face, the elder 2 turned and ran back the way they'd come, with Sakura all but pulling Akane by the arm before one of his clones leapt down, away from the fight, grabbed the toddler and ran right behind the 2. After them, 4 of the black-clad assassins carved their way through his clones, slicing through them like a scythe through wheat, with the remaining 2 identifying him in the mayhem of his remaining clones to try and stop him from interfering, effectively herding him away from his team like a pack of wolves isolating their prey. They were good. But no force, on heaven or hell, was ever gonna stop him from protecting his friends again. He dodged and weaved, ducking beneath their kunai and shuriken, formed his hand seals with rapid, practiced motions, chakra surging through his body before he slammed both hands into the ground. Doton Doriakatsu! The earth trembled at their feet, and with a thunderous crack that rattled their bones, the earth was split in 2, a yawning chasm, dozens of meters wide, at least 100 meters long, cleft the earth open. The ninja stumbled, not expecting the sudden hazard of an earthquake, allowing him to form a second technique before they could stop him. Doton Dorya Johiki! At the clear other end of the canyon he just made, the earth sharply rose straight into the air, forming a cliff, the size of a building to stand between the ninja and his teammates/students. Before he could recover from his crouched position, however, one of the assassins rushed him, blade in hand, and drove the knife right into his gut, all but lifting him off the ground with the blow, knocking the wind out of him before grabbing him by the jacket in order to cut his whole stomach open. He would have succeeded too, if Naruto hadn't retaliated by drawing a kunai from his ankle holster and punching it into his neck. The man dropped him like a brick, his hands flying to the ruin of his throat as he gurgled and choked before falling over dead, leaving him and his sliced open midsection plus 3 clones staring down the 4 remaining nin dash. Wait. 4 shit. Chapter 42. The ground shook and Sasuke barely managed to keep his footing through the violent tremors, needing to grab onto a tree just beside him to avoid falling flat on his ass. Sakura fared little better, falling onto her hands and knees. The thunderous, bone-rattling crack that ran through his body like an electric charge made his heart skip a beat. He turned looking over his shoulder to find out what had made that sound and felt his obsidian eyes going wide as a massive gorge literally formed itself right before his eyes, the earth breaking like a fruit being pulled apart before he received his next surprise, with his side of the new ravine suddenly lurching upwards like the gods had just decided to manipulate the earth like wet clay. And then he, Sakura, and Akane were at the top of a cliff, the enemy ninja on the other side, well out of reach. Along with Naruto, he turned, half surprised, but only just as he looked at another Naruto holding Akane in his arms. Shadow clone? Shit, had to be a clone. Everything happened so fast, he guessed Naruto wanted to ensure their safety. One ninja's life in exchange for his 3 genin. How long would he be able to hold them off? How big was this gorge? If they went around, how much of a head start could that give them? Would they still catch up? How close was the next border outpost where they could call for backup? Should they try and help Naruto instead? They might not be much help. But if, or when they got past Naruto, they just end up dead anyway. Was it better to fight here with a high chance of dying or try to run away with a small chance of escape? Sasuke's thoughts were a whirl of conflicting emotions, and he himself was answering his own questions as he thought them. He kept coming up with a single, common answer. He didn't know. He didn't have a damn clue about what to do here. He looked to the clone in askance, finding him helping Sakura back to her feet and setting Akane down on the ground. What do we do? The question was out of his mouth before he could think otherwise, and he hated the note of panic he could feel fraying at his emotions. But the clone apparently didn't hear him, or ignored him, and Sasuke felt his nerve begin to ebb as the sounds of a fight cut through the air at the other side of the gorge. He didn't dare look that way. He looked to Akane. She seemed pale, shaking like a leaf in the wind and nauseous. It seemed more shell-shock than any real grip on her composure that kept her from breaking down and crying. She was the target here. These men were after her. Let's go! Naruto suddenly demanded, standing up to his full height. Full sprint, straight south, don't stop for anything. As for the real Naruto, he found himself assessing his situation with some measure of distress, to be perfectly honest. For a ninja of unknown rank against little old, injured him, with nothing but a single shadow clone to protect his students/teammates at the other side of a ravine from a 5th ninja that had gone after them. To add to his concerns, a sharp lance of pain brought a fresh reminder about the knife currently in his gut. Well, he'd face longer odds than just a time travel thing, he encouraged himself. He hissed as he stood, pulling out the kunai knife to let the wound begin to heal. It was deep. It might have been fatal without surgery or a medic nin if he were anyone else. The 4 remaining ninja moved like a pack of wolves, wordlessly coordinating to surround him with the practiced ease that came from having extensively worked together before. You could have survived, their leader said, shaking his head. Now we will kill you and take her anyway. He took a deep breath, putting his focus off the pain as he glared at the guy. Yeah, he chuckled. That's not going to happen. His hands blurred together to form his signature shadow clone seal, only for the ninja on all sides to rush forward, their speed easily on par with most jounin he knew. The attack was brutal, efficient. Kunai blades punched into a multitude of vital organs from 4 directions: throat, heart, kidneys, the artery along his inner arm and hip. He would have been dead before he hit the ground if he didn't vanish in a puff of smoke a second later, leaving their thoroughly dead friend vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving their very much dead friend standing in his place, a burning explosive tag on his chest. The enemy nin didn't even need a second to put the pieces together, all of them reacting with admirable speed to get out of the way. A second later the ground they'd occupied went up in a fantastic explosion, the remains of their thrice-dead friend getting flung around in a myriad of gore-ridden pieces. They hit the ground on their feet, on alert and searching for him. They didn't need to search long. With a crack of dirt and stone his hand punched out of the ground, grabbing one of the enemy jounin by the leg, and pulling one leg down into the ground up to his hip. Like a spider springing from a burrow, Naruto burst out of the dirt to the man's left, a glowing blue orb in hand, his free hand catching the man's reflexive strike before the Rasengan was shoved into the jounin assassin's exposed ribs. The ninja convulsed once, body finally contorting into an odd, broken angle with the last jerk of his muscles before his insides were destroyed, and he slumped over dead. The remaining three were pouncing on him in a second, unrelenting, undeterred. He ducked and rolled, weaved between their attacks as best he could, but every time he tried to gain some distance one of them would be right there, closing it, and giving his teammates a chance to close in all over again. This was no amateur group that had only just started working together. They weren't tripping over each other's attacks. This was a well-oiled, practiced, efficient machine, and every attack slipped by just a little more, got a little closer to striking him. If he kept playing their game, he was going to lose. He nearly missed his opportunity when it came. It was a slip, literally, one small slip on muddied ground that only just managed to make the ninja overstep his footing just a bit that gave him the chance to escape. The rain his team had been bemoaning earlier may have just saved his life as he dug in his heels, pivoted sharply and slammed his elbow into the man's masked face, cracking his jaw and sending him to the ground before he took the chance to lunge past him and rush into the trees. They sprinted through the trees, the orange, burning light that of the rapidly setting sun cast long, dark shadows across the forest. "Stop!" The genin almost didn't, too panicked and harried, barely even recognizing Naruto's voice before their training and common sense overcame their fear and they ground themselves to a complete stop on the trees. "What?" Sakura hissed. "Why are we stopping?" It was Akane that noticed first, piercing the gloom of early night with her gaze, better than both her teammates. "Naruto, what's wrong with your eyes?" The blue of his eyes, normally dark like deep ocean waters, was clear, nearly translucent in the flecks of light. "At the edge of my range," he said, voice low and almost self-recriminating at the fact. "This is as far as I go." "Range? You're a clone!" Sakura all but shrieked, suddenly horrified. "We left Naruto-sensei alone back there. You worry too much." The blonde grinned with a bright smile that seemed completely genuine. "I'm still around, so we know I'm just fine back there. But look, you guys need to keep going." He pointed. "Straight that way around 5 kilometers, then turn south by southwest, 30 degrees or so." The genin fidgeted in place, turning their eyes to each other, then at the clone with blatant, palpable uncertainty. "Don't worry," the clone reassured them, smiling in a way that made it seem like he was sending them to buy groceries, not leaving them alone in the wilderness with a potential pursuit party. "Everything will be fine. Just keep going. I'll meet up with you guys soon." There was either nothing more to say, or the clone's time had simply been used up, because in the next second he vanished, leaving a rapidly vanishing puff of smoke behind him. Sasuke swallowed thickly, looking to Sakura, and then to Akane. He took a deep breath, swallowing to try and gather some of his nerve before he brought himself to speak. "All right, Dash." He cleared his throat. "Let's keep moving, it's not very far from the next base, and the faster we get there the better off we'll be. We can ask the Chunin there to come back and help Naruto and I," Akane suddenly said. The thought hadn't even occurred to him. Frankly, he doubted Naruto could hold out that long. Still, he was not gonna tell her that. Sakura didn't say anything either, even though by her tremulous smile at the girl he could tell she was thinking the same. She reached down to Akane's shoulder and began leading/tugging her along before he decided to take point slightly ahead of them. All 3 jounin pursued him. A mixed blessing to be sure. He tried to evade, tried to give them the slip and double back towards his team. But a gut wound that dripped blood everywhere and the need for a breakneck pace didn't exactly leave him time to cover his tracks properly. They were constantly at his heels, the sound of their pursuit like a whisper on the wind. They'd been waiting for them at that camp for a while. They were rested, he meanwhile had been walking all day beforehand, and the strain was beginning to wear on him. With Kurama this would have been so easy, his injury would have healed by now, and his speed and power would have let him run circles around these guys with just basic taijutsu if he chose to do so. As it stood now, he was barely able to stay ahead of them, incapable of even hiding effectively. Every time he tried, they zoned in on him like bloodhounds. Their tactic was becoming obvious. They weren't trying to fight him. Not really. He'd already killed 2 of them. They were wary of taking another loss just as much as he was wary of jumping into a 3-against-1 engagement. They were hurting him away from his team. He didn't need to kill them. With his stamina to go on far longer than they could, and his direction heading south, they'd eventually have to break off the pursuit. Conversely, they didn't have to risk their lives trying to kill him. Just buy time for their friend to go after his team. He couldn't let that happen. In retrospect, his directness in this situation was perhaps not one of his brighter moments. His feet crashed onto a tree branch, bringing his full, forward momentum to a dead stop before he turned right on his heel and decided to take care of this problem like he did all others. Head on. The 3 ninja reacted with clockwork precision, spreading out to surround him in response. A part of him, that irrational, imbecilic part that lost all reason at the notion of Sakura, Sasuke, or any of his friends in danger, wanted to simply bull rush straight past them. But he brought himself under control, knowing that, until they were dealt with, he'd never be able to get to his team, let alone help them. Without even making use of the traditional hand seals, 2 clones appeared at his side before jumping away, forming their own seals as he jumped after one of the jounin. The jounin threw out his own kunai in retaliation, their rings tied with burning explosive tags just as he and his clones finished their hand seals. Futon, Senpu go Hiki, Katan, go Kaiyu no Jutsu! He thrust out his palms, and gale force winds erupted around him into a condensed typhoon. The flames that were spat out from his clones were caught in the cyclone, and spread with preternatural speed, a raging inferno that could have leveled the village square. Suiton, Suchitatsu, Doton, Gabenkyu! He heard the other jounin call out their defensive techniques. They had a split second extra to react. The jounin just half a yard in front of him, with his hands still outstretched from his kunai throw, didn't. He screamed as he burned. The explosive tags went off, the fires scalding his exposed face and hands, the concussive force hitting him in the chest like a sledgehammer, knocking the wind out of him and sending him hurtling back down. The trees were all set ablaze, making it impossible for him to catch himself on their surface. He hit the ground on his feet, biting down on a cry of pain as the bones of his legs threatened to break from the massive drop. The heat turned the forest into an overpowering hell, the acrid smoke stung at his eyes, making them tear and water even as he searched for the 2 remaining enemy ninja. The all-encompassing stink of burning wood all came together to turn the battlefield into a nightmare landscape that was as hazardous to him as his enemies. He moved to stand, limping as the pain in his legs was just a bit sharper than it had been. Did he break something? He couldn't let it stop him. Broken legs or not, he was going to win this. There, a lumped mound of dirt that danced and writhed with the shadows. He moved, faster than anyone with his injuries had any right to. Either from adrenaline, or just sheer, stubborn determination that let him cross the distance in an eye blink. He formed his seals mid-run, diving for the earth wall as wind blades erupted and surrounded his body, a whirling dervish of blades that could cut through anything. Even a wall of pure stone. With a crash of rock, dust and dirt, he punched through the shell of the earth dome like a drill. Rolling with his landing, he found his enemy in the gloom. Surprised and off guard, the man was wholly unprepared. With a thought, he bent the earth and forced it to seal itself again, shutting the hole he'd made, trapping the jounin with him. The jounin moved to stand, realizing his own technique was being used against him as the earth dome refused to collapse, only for his height to be his disadvantage in the confined space, all but needing to hunch down, shoulders, neck and skull pressed up to the arched ceiling as Naruto pounced. The taijutsu exchange was brutal, and he forced the jounin to remain on the defensive, using his smaller size and greater maneuverability in the small space to the greatest advantage it could grant him. He rarely used his fists, truth be told. He didn't have the speed, or the momentum here to make up for the lack of stopping power his body had at this age. Instead, he utilized them purely defensively, using them to shove aside and redirect attacks, grappling and making sure the man's fists and kunai blades hit the walls around them. His offense was centered around his elbows, knees and feet. The tough bone and small space proving ideal in the fight. The jounin, bloodied, bruised and becoming more desperate, finally just tried to bull rush him, abandoning all semblance of trying to control or drop the earth dome around them in order to simply grab hold of him and use his superior brute strength to his advantage. With full control of the Earth Dome, Naruto drove a stone spike through the top of his skull, its pointed tip punching through the underside of his jaw. He stood there, impaled on the spike before Naruto retracted it, allowing him to fall over. He felt a surge of chakra outside, a sudden, rapid build-up that could only be an offensive technique. Too late, too fast. The walls of the Earth Dome shattered like cheap glass, and Naruto felt his vision go stark white with pain as his body was blasted with arcs of lightning. We should have been there by now. Sakura's voice was barely above a whisper, meek and almost frightened. She was right, though. It felt like they'd been running for days. He was coming to a rather rapid conclusion that he'd gotten them lost. It rankled to admit that, but he had taken on the job of leading Sakura and Akane through the forest after they'd left Naruto. His teammates been following him, his lead. So this fuck-up was purely on his shoulders. He gnawed on his lip, his heart thundering in his chest as if it wanted to burst out of his ribs with the fear, the anxiety that gripped him at the thought that he was only going to dig them deeper into the hole they were in. Should we make camp? The question was offered hesitantly, almost timidly. Sasuke turned, looking at Akane over his shoulder, who stood beside Sakura, casting a wary eye over every shadow and moving branch. He began, then stopped, taking a moment to look at his surroundings. He didn't have the foggiest notion of where they were. Nano-sensei and Irika-sensei always told us never to travel through the forests at night, the girl insisted. It's alright to wait for light. Didn't they tell you guys the same thing? Yeah, they did. Now that he remembered his first-year lessons, they even got it to rhyme. It's alright to wait for light, he repeated, mumbling under his breath. Sasuke? He started, gaining his awareness again and finding Sakura staring at him with a fearful uncertainty that mirrored his own. She's right, he finally said. We're not getting anywhere fast. And if we keep going without any idea where we're going, we could end up going in a completely wrong direction and end up in even more trouble. He determined before looking around. There was a tree, a termite-rotted thing, hollowed out and half looking like it could tip over at any moment. They'd have to make do. Sakura, you were good at trap-making, right? Scored highest in the class, she affirmed, sending a shaky smile in his direction. Mine were always a bit more subtle than yours. He forgot to smile back, just nodding. All right, set up some basic ones, Akane, get us a fire going. I'll see what I can do, set the tree up to be a bit more adequate. The two girls nodded, and he kept an eye on both of them as he and they worked, with Sakura pulling out her tools, ninja wire, rope, kunai, shuriken and smoke bombs, beginning to set up a perimeter, and Akane marching up to the taller branches and plucking out the brambles and twigs, tossing them down into a pile they could use to burn through the night. He and Sakura would have to take the watch. If he had to guess, it was close to 9 or 10, that meant he'd have to stay up for about 3 or 4 hours, and Sakura would too. That would get them to 4 or 5 a.m. when the sun was rising. Akane couldn't. Not only was she too young, and too inexperienced, she was the target right now. He and Sakura had to protect her, not the other way around. Not much point in putting her up as a watchman. It'd basically be the equivalent to leaving a lamb to guard the sheep-dogs from a pack of wolves. Naruto's heartbeat was erratic. That was the first thing he noticed as the worst of the pain subsided. Then, it was that he couldn't move his left arm, couldn't feel it. He struggled to open his eyes for a moment, trying to look, assess the damage. He sat, leaning against the biggest chunk of rubble that remained of the Earth Dome. He turned, looking to his left arm, wondering why it wasn't moving. It was a rock. About 3 times the size of a kunai, the sharp stone was jutting out of his shoulder joint. Yeah, he wouldn't be using that for a while. His skull was pounding, the splitting headache barely even allowing him to think. Our briefings did not do you justice. He looked up, squinting past the smoke and the flame to see the last Jounin approaching him, weapons drawn and held defensively, ready to react at a moment's notice. Looks like he wasn't being underestimated anymore. He moved his lips in his best attempt at a smile, tasting metal, now that he cared to notice. Maybe you guys just suck? He offered. You got very lucky. The second man you killed, Taida, he was our genjutsu specialist. Your primary weakness, or so I'm told. He moved, feeling razor blades sliding across every inch of his flesh. Even just getting his hand to push himself upward seemed to be a colossal effort. His hand pressed down on the wet, moist earth. And that same hand was speared a second later by a kunai blade, thrown with enough power to drive the weapon straight through flesh, sinew and bone, burying it up to the hilt, nailing him in place as the tip dug into the ground. It was more shock than any kind of self-control else that kept him from screaming. That, the Jounin spat, was for Taida. Would you like to know the other members of my team that you killed? Okay. Naruto groaned, falling onto his side, breathing deeply through his nostrils. I take it you're kinda pissed about that. He groaned. The man stepped closer, the stomping of his feet, audible through the crackling flames before he lashed out and kicked him so hard across his ribs the crack of bone was audible, even through the roaring, crackling flame. His hand was almost ripped open from the kunai before the dirt gave and the weapon was ripped out of the ground, still in his palm. Naruto's cough was a wet gurgle of blood. The Jounin stood over him, his contempt almost palpable, even behind the mask. I'm gonna enjoy killing you. Naruto smirked at him. Don't think so. He thrust his hand with the kunai up to the man's face. The ninja jerked, blinking stupidly as he stared down at the blade that was 3 feet too far to do any damage. Then it appeared razor-thin, a slice along his cheekbone. Wind blades are a lot longer than people think. Naruto thought aloud, feeling his chakra ebb and flow through the knife that was still skewering his palm through and through. The man blinked, confused, as he brought his fingers up to his face as though to touch his punctured cheek. He didn't even realize he was dead before. One eye drooped in its socket with the nerve damage before he simply fell over. Naruto took a breath, feeling like death had warmed over him. Nah. Not yet. He had to get back to his team, had to keep them safe. He couldn't lose them a second time. He just had to move, get to his feet. Once he got to his feet and started walking, he'd be fine. He needed to see them safe. He just needed to stand up. Sasuke felt the chill of the cold night claw at his fingers, making him shiver as he huffed a breath onto his cupped hands to try and warm them. The fire Akane had built was still going strong, its light dimmed by a cloth he'd managed to hang and properly wrap around the hollowed-out tree that served as their shelter. Undoubtedly he'd be a lot warmer, but he wouldn't be much service if he was grouped up with Sakura and Akane if they were attacked. The other issue was something he and his 2 teammates had forgotten about in their anxiety-ridden day. He was hungry. None of them had eaten since the morning, and this wasn't the time to go looking. He was hardly going to starve. By tomorrow morning he'd be surprised if they didn't manage to forage some edible wild berries or find a stream where they could catch a fish or 2, but it certainly didn't help the situation for tonight. Right now he was sitting up in a tree, one that he himself had surrounded with a handful of traps, and even one that was the equivalent of a dead man's switch. If he moved, like say, dropping over dead, the handful of explosive tags he was leaning against, concealing them with his body, would go off. And if that didn't kill the assassins, it would at least warn Sakura to take Akane and run. Rather grim, even by his standards, but he wasn't stupid enough to think a Jounin couldn't flatly kill him with a comparably minuscule effort such as to not at least try to prepare for that eventuality. He looked up to the sky, trying to place the time, as he felt his eyelids beginning to grow heavy. He felt something brush against his hand. Was that a feather? He reached out, grabbing the boy by the shoulder as he melted out of the shadows of the forest, making sure he didn't fall to his death as he slumped in his forced sleep. Personally, if he could avoid killing these kids, he would prefer that. They only had one target here, the Senju, no need to go making this worse. It was why he made it his priority to go after them when the Uzumaki had cracked open the earth to cut them off. If any of the others had gone, they wouldn't have hesitated to kill the 2 other genin. Especially after the kids had led them on a merry old chase like they had. He patted the Uchiha boy twice on the shoulder before climbing down the tree as quietly as he could. The traps were good, for genin anyway. Above average at the very least. But too textbook. They weren't easy to spot, just not creative enough to catch him off guard. He crept closer to where the girls were resting, reaching forward with a delicate touch. He lifted the cloth just a little bit at the edges, checking for any final trap they may have laid here. He found it, a thin string, nearly invisible, set to go off when the tarp was pulled open. He did not see what it was supposed to trigger from here, however. He drew his knife, and with a nick, the string was cut. He heard a gasp inside the tent. Then a loud clack. He barely dove out of the way in time to avoid the volley of shuriken that ripped the cloth of the makeshift shelter to tatters, the little metal stars flying off in every direction like shrapnel from an explosion. The Jounin rolled to his feet, looking to the shelter where he saw the pink-haired girl nursing a fresh cut on her shin, the wire he'd cut leading to a blade that had fallen from above to cut her leg, waking her up, letting her trigger the shuriken trap herself. Clever girl. The target sprang up where she slept beside Haruno, green eyes wide as she stared at him with frightened eyes, like a deer caught in the proverbial headlights. Sasuke! The older girl shrieked, jumping to her feet and stepping in front of Senju. Sasuke, where are you? The Jounin felt the boy break out of the delicate sleep genjutsu. He sighed. Why couldn't they just make it easier on themselves? Reaching his feet, he decided to try one last time. Give me the Senju, and none of you need to die. His answer were 3 shuriken aimed at his head, falling down from the tree line above, courtesy of the Uchiha boy. Sakura, take Akane and run! He screamed. That wasn't going to happen. Catching one of the shuriken mid-flight, as he let the other 2 pass him by, the Jounin spun, redirecting its full momentum and tossing it with a flick of his wrist, burying it into the flesh just below Sakura's knee, between the cap and the shin bone. Her scream could have woken the dead. She fell back, flat on her ass. She sat on the forest floor as her hands hovered and shook over the bloody blades, her breathing coming in short, rapid gasps as her brain tried to come to grips with the shock of her injury. Sakura-chan! The Senju girl screamed, rushing over to the girl, turning her back to him. He heard the Uchiha boy long before he was in any danger. Turning with the same fluid ease that he'd caught the shuriken with, he grabbed the boy by his outstretched wrist, twisting harshly, forcing him to drop the kunai knife. He was forced to raise his other arm in a hasty block as Sasuke kicked off the ground, twisting his body in mid-air to deliver a dexterous spin kick to his face. His grip on the boy's wrist slackened, which was enough for Sasuke to pull himself free, rolling forward before spinning around, hands cupped in front of his mouth and spitting out a fireball point blank. With a shunshin that could only have worked on a genin, he appeared to the boy's right, avoiding the fireball completely before delivering a kick that cracked against the back of the boy's skull, sending him crashing to the forest floor face first, concussed at the very least. He could give him credit for the effort. It was then that he noticed something. Chakra signatures. Phonos, 7 of them. All making a beeline straight towards him. Looks like they were closer to the border outpost than he thought. He turned away from Sasuke, rushing straight for the 2 girls. It was the Haruno girl that saw him approaching first, gathering enough of her wits to pull a kunai out of her leg holster and toss it off to their left somewhere. He stopped moving, hearing the thunk of the kunai striking wood, followed by the sharp crack of something breaking. A tree branch, about the size of a desk, swung down from the treetops like a pendulum, and it was covered in a myriad of explosive notes. Oh sure, he dove back, hitting the ground and covering his head as the tree went off with enough force to knock the wind out of him. His ears were ringing, his brain felt like it was rattling in the confines of his skull. He heard the girls scream, and realized that, in true amateur fashion, they were closer to the blast than he was. Had he just lost his target to a genin's stupidity? He scrambled to his feet, rushing as quickly as he could past the burning debris to find the 2 girls. The Haruno girl was on the ground, unconscious, blood coating the whole side of her face. He couldn't clearly see the damage, but it seemed significant. The Senju was beside her, clutching at bleeding ears, still somehow conscious, despite the concussive force that should have killed someone of her size. Lucky, he supposed. Katon, how Senka no Jutsu! The Jounin turned, rounding on the Uchiha as a hail of fireballs converged around him like a flytrap. Suiton. Suijin Hiki, he spat out a volume of water, the swirling torrent swallowing the fireballs before he dispersed it, keeping just a single handful in his palm. Suiton, Ryuzaban. The handful of water shot out like a lance, extending to a single sharp, impaling point, and punching into the surprised Uchiha's stomach. The genin coughed, spitting out blood as he lay on the ground. Akane, run! The boy was loyal. He'd give him the suddenly. He felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. The chakra felt sick, oppressive. Like his guts were being shredded and turned inside out. It wasn't human. He turned, finding a 6-year-old girl, where he found the promise of death. Jinchuriki. The girl's chakra flared in an aurora, brushing across his skin like a burning, red-hot brand. He had to get out of here, had to report back and tell them the girl's status as the holder of the Kyubi. She stood to her unintimidating 3 feet, sucked down a breath, and breathed out an inferno. The fire moved forward like a tidal wave, spreading out like a curtain to swallow everything in between them. He formed his hand seals, pouring as much chakra as he'd ever used into the defensive wall of water. Suiton, Suijin Hiki. The steam was instantly overpowering, the sheer heat of it turning the clearing into a sauna, but still, it held. He felt the oppressive chakra beginning to taper off and wane, and his panic quickly waned as he remembered. Jinchuriki or not, she was a child. Her power was nascent, untrained, in a body with clear limits. He could survive this. The fire seemed to surge forward at his thoughts, trying to brute force its way through the water wall it wouldn't. The sharp, harsh pain of shurikens cutting into his flesh across his ribs and side gave him only a second to realize his mistake of ignoring the Uchiha before his technique faltered, and the flames punched forward like a battering ram, swallowing him whole. Chapter 43. What he remembered when he fell asleep was pain. What he woke up to was pain. His bones ached, he felt cold, freezing even. His skull was pounding and his eyes refused to open. Every thought was like slogging through thick mud, barely even dredging up from unconsciousness before he lost it to the lethargic stillness that felt little different from death. He'd been here before. Found another one. Dead? His eyes struggled to open, the sound of new, unfamiliar voices pushing him to find them, see what was coming. He wasn't sure how many more tricks he had up his sleeve, but he could probably pull something off. He just had to move. How hard could that be? Yeah. Starting to think this kid had Helikawa. I found him. He heard the footsteps on soft, green grass, the startled voices drifting closer. What little progress and effort he made in opening his eyes seemed to be for nothing as someone stood over him, blocking out the light. Not fair. He hadn't started moving yet. Holy shit, is he breathing? He's what? The person moved, kneeling above him, followed by another, and he felt the familiar wash of healing chakra moving through his body, knitting wounds as someone else lightly slapped his face. Hey Uzumaki, can you hear me? He couldn't move, could barely see, still, he had to know. His voice came out like sandpaper rasping over a stone. My team, where's my team? Here. The bowl was held out, a steaming broth wafting up a smell of meat and cooked vegetables. When was the last time he ate? Yesterday. Longer? He couldn't remember. I'm not hungry, was Sasuke's numb response. The Chunin, an older man with a full, thick beard, reached down, grabbed his wrist and put the bowl in his hand. Not a request. You take food when you get it. Never forget that. The man handed him a spoon, and Sasuke forced himself to swallow mouthfuls that tasted like ash on his tongue as the man took a seat again. He had been hungry, he remembered that thought specifically as he'd sat up in that tree. But right now, all he could see, all he could think about were his teammates. Akane was unconscious, forced into a coma or sleep or whatever, by the same Chunin that had come to their rescue. They were scared of her. And Sakura was laying on a cot, pale as a corpse, another Chunin medic tending to the ruin that was the side of her face. There had been so much blood, even now her usual dress was drying with stains that covered her whole left side, the flesh that hadn't been burned by the blast from the explosive tags had been shredded by the shrapnel, and it was all his fault. He had taken first watch. He was the one that was supposed to watch out for them, he was the one that was supposed to lead them to the Chunin outpost. But he'd not only gotten them lost, when it came time to stand guard over them he'd fallen asleep. If Sakura hadn't woken up, if she hadn't put up the traps she'd put up. He fought the guy. But the fact is he never should have gotten that close in the first place. He shouldn't have gotten that close without Sasuke doing something to try and stop him, or warn his teammates to run. Sakura and Akane were his teammates, and he had let them down so completely it could hardly be put into words. Lingering on his mind as well was Akane's display. Again, he wasn't stupid, and those suspicions he'd had immediately after Akane joined them as a full-time teammate about higher forces at work was roaring back to the forefront of his mind. She had a great deal of chakra, that much was proven. What he had seen on the field wasn't something you could chalk up to raw chakra. It had felt sick. Acid crawling into his throat. And the fire she'd used. Having a strong affinity for an element was one thing, but using such a massively powerful technique without hand seals, the girl wasn't normal, even for the daughter of two high-ranking ninja, and he didn't have the foggiest notion of what the cause was. Judging from the look on his face, the ninja that had come after them was just as clueless. Cold comfort if ever there was one. The soup was lukewarm by the time he made himself take another spoonful. It was cold sludge by the time he made himself finish it. The medic worked ceaselessly, pulling out little slivers of wood, cleaning the bloodied surface of Sakura's face, tying a bandage that wrapped itself from her cheek and eye, up the whole side of her head, inexorably veiling her beneath the bloodied, once white strips. It's gonna give her a nasty scar. Sasuke's heart felt like it was sinking into his feet. Sir! The shout came from the trees, a second before one of the Chunin Sasuke recalled had been with the search party came barreling through the foliage, wide-eyed and panting like a winded dog. Sir! He swallowed. We found him! Alive! The Chunin commander, the one that had given him the soup, asked, clearly surprised. Yes, sir. Sasuke felt as if he'd just been kicked in the teeth by a mule. Naruto was alive, he was. How? That was an entire team of enemy ninja and he was just one Chunin. He's injured. The scout continued. Murashige counted at least 2 broken ribs and a shattered shoulder joint and collarbone. His ankle looked badly sprained too. And the enemy team? Any sign of them? Yeah, dead. The scout answered. I think he got all 5 of them. You sure there were just 6? It took a moment for Sasuke to realize that he was the one being addressed. When he did, he almost jerked in place before he answered. Why, yeah. That's all we saw. The commander scratched at his beard before looking to the scout. All right, I assume the others are bringing him back as we speak. If you haven't secured the bodies yet, then I want that done as soon as you've brought Uzumaki back. Yes, sir. The man nodded before moving to head back into the trees. I'm coming with you. The words were out of Sasuke's mouth before he even knew he'd reached his feet. Demanding and pleading all at once. The scout looked to his commander in askance, and the man gave his permission with a wave of his hand. When they finally rejoined the group of ninja, Sasuke felt cold. A pit of dread forming in his guts as he saw Naruto laying still on the grass. The only indication that he was still even alive were his eyes scrunched tight with pain and the slow breaths that made his chest rise and fall. Uzumaki. Akunoichi called to him. I need you to keep talking, alright? But I'm a boring conversationalist. He answered her, revealing a smile that looked more like a grimace. Oh, I don't get bored easily, she said, hands glowing softly with the medical technique as Sasuke marched closer, tossing a look to the bodies the other Chunin were lining up side by side. Looks like you got a visitor, the woman said. Naruto groaned as he forced himself to open his eyes. He smiled. Hey, you guys are okay then. Worried, these guys were lying just to make me feel better. Sasuke swallowed, unsure if he was lying. We're okay. He made himself kneel at his half-dead sensei's side. We ran into some trouble, but we're all okay, he said, not wanting Naruto to be caught completely off guard when he realized how hurt the others were. Heh. That's good. He smiled. Not gonna let you guys die again. He raised an eyebrow, looking to the Kunoichi medic. Uzumaki, you remember my name? She asked, opening up his eye a bit. Kiba's sister? Damn it. She mumbled before looking to her teammates. We gotta get him back. Let's get moving. She turned back to Naruto. Uzumaki, I'm gonna put you under for a bit. Okay, don't fight the genjutsu. Sasuke saw her place her hand over Naruto's eyes, and when she pulled away, his sensei was asleep. Danzo rose and fell with the moon on most days. The sun was no place for him, the public eye, the place where people like Sarutobi and Tsunade were seen and beloved. His work took place in the shadows, in the dark places where the villagers and common shinobi would not venture, would not see. He was not strong, not anymore. Age had withered away his strength as sure as a river wears down a stone. But he still had power. Might. And he used it as the others slept, as they retreated to their homes to await a new day. As he passed through the day in his home, tending to his garden, keeping himself apprised of the events both big and small that he was involved in, he waited for the light to fade, and the dark to cast its shade. As the sun finally began to fall behind the furthest mountains to the west, the shadows grew and snaked their way through his home, and his people, his agents, grew out of the dark like weeds sprouting from a vibrant garden. They came to him when they needed a new task, or moved to complete the tasks he'd already given them. It was a quiet state of affairs. None of his neighbors, or even his guards, would ever suspect the activities undertaken within these walls. Whispers, shadows. It took too long, took too much effort, to detect the one shadow that lingered. That remained hidden. It was only with the encroaching light, when the shadows receded, that he saw the uninvited guest as he was setting himself down to finally rest. Sloppy. Slow, Age, his one remaining eye bored into the dark, finding the porcelain wolf mask. Hataki. You have been given one chance to offer an explanation, the man warned. He didn't need to wonder what the consequences would be for an inadequate explanation. He took a breath, measuring his words. A valued asset could not be entrusted to the care of an inadequate chunin. Needless to say, the Uzumaki surpassed all expectations. You risked the safety of an heiress to our most prestigious clan. Our Jinchuriki. Hatake stressed. Your crime is treason. He snorted. Hardly. Or did you think that outpost of our chunin moved to help out of pure serendipity? Hatake remained silent, no doubt awaiting the order to leave, or strike him down. If it was taking this long, it was clear Hiruzen was far too irate to see things clearly. He almost sighed. Foolish, old rival. He stood up from his bed, making his way over to a nearby wall panel and pushing it open and pulling out a file. He'd have to change the place of the rest again. The leak Kumogakure exploited, he said, tossing the file towards the elite Anbu. All of his information, and the information of his contacts in Kumo. Use it as you see fit. Hatake remained staring at him. For a moment, Danzo felt the stirrings of genuine fear begin to wrap around his gut. He still had some tricks. Some means of fighting back. This was his home after all, where he was safest. He would not die without a fight, but he was no fool. 20 years ago, this would have been a fight. Now, it was a formality to an execution. Had he miscalculated? Over or underestimated Hiruzen? For a long, interminable moment, the two remained rooted in place. Then, finally, the light broke through Danzo's window, and the old man could see the wisps of smoke that was Hatake's body disappearing right before his eyes. When he finally vanished, there was just a piece of paper, nailed to the wall behind where the man had been standing. Do not push me further. He frequently bemoaned Sarutobi's weakness. His lack of stomach for the dirty work. But the warning was clear, and he was not fool enough to think Hiruzen too weak, or lacking the stomach to carry it out. The light cast away the shadows, and Danzo forced himself to fall into an uneasy, restless sleep. Chapter 44. Her footsteps were no louder than anyone else in the hospital. Little pats of feet on cold, clean tile. But to Ino's own ears, they were as loud as battle drums, every step feeling like it was hammering against her chest. She had wanted to bring Shikamaru and Shuji, at first. Then decided against it, backtracked on that decision, reconsidered their absence and settled on it all over again before repeating the process a half-dozen more times. She never would have thought the notion of seeing Sakura would make her so nervous. When she makes it up to the room number, she hesitates, staring at it like a monster was hiding behind the thin wooden barrier. Finally, she gathered her courage, stiffening her spine and taking a deep, calming breath before pushing it open. Sakura? Her voice wavered. Far weaker than she wanted it to be. She saw her in the light of the hallway, her skin pale, a single green eye staring back at her, the other covered up by bandages as she smiled softly. Hey Ino! The Yamanaka heiress tried, she really tried not to stare, but she couldn't. What little she could see of the side of Sakura's face looked like it had been shredded. The only consolation she could find was that Sakura's full head of hair, the girl's pride and joy, had been left completely unharmed. How are you feeling? She ventured, then winced at her question. She was nearly killed and is scarred for life, you idiot. How do you think she feels? I'm okay, Sakura said. Not sure if it's sunken yet, or if I'm going through some sort of strange, delayed reaction, but I honestly... She paused, then shrugged. I don't really give a crap, you know? About this, I mean. She raised her hand, which Ino also noted had bandages wrapped tightly around the pinky and the finger beside it, to tap against the bandages on her face. Honestly, the only thing I keep thinking about is how we almost let Akane-chan get captured. Ino balked. Let her? Sakura! You're a genin that was taking on a jounin. There was no letting anything. You guys are so lucky to be alive, it's not even fun dash, and that shouldn't have been the case. Sakura shouted back suddenly, startling Ino into silence as the pinkette glared at the sheets around her feet. You know what I did when that guy was in front of us? I called Sasuke. I screamed for Sasuke to come and help us. That dash makes you smart. Both young women stiffened at the voice, the door behind Ino swinging open to reveal none other than Tsunade herself. The medic nin turned her eyes from Sakura to Ino. You're a friend. But out for now. Come back in an hour. Nodding dumbly, Ino stepped back, allowing Tsunade to pass before she, in a moment of haste, stepped forward and offered Sakura a quick hug. No matter what, I'm glad you're okay, forehead. Before rushing back out the door, hearing it shut behind her. Meanwhile, halfway across town, in the hissing rain of an autumn downpour, sitting at Ichiraku Ramen, was none other than Uchiha Sasuke. He didn't frequent the ramen shop, truth be told. Ramen wasn't exactly a staple of a good ninja diet though, from the picture he could spy on the wall, and the fact that Naruto kept inviting them almost every other day. Naruto was certainly the opposite. But today he wanted something simple, stupid to take his mind off of everything. Sasuke wasn't stupid. He wasn't slow or oblivious. From the moment she had been placed on his team, he knew there was something going on with Akane. With Naruto too. Those ninja had shown up on their mission hunting her. She had pulled out a power that had made his insides roil, and a fear surged through his mind with a primal, instinctual rush. Naruto was a chunin their age that had, by all appearances, defeated 5 jounin. That wasn't normal. That wasn't anywhere near normal, he'd asked, as much as he dared, about him, about her. But Naruto had grown very quiet when he was lucid enough to speak again, and it was only after they'd reached the village walls did the normally bright, cheerful blonde offered a solemn promise that they'd all talk tomorrow. Tomorrow was, so far, taking its sweet goddamn time getting here. They'd left Sakura at the hospital, Akane with her father, and Naruto had gone off to God knows where, leaving him alone. Alone with nothing but the memories of his bleeding, battered, near-dead teammates to follow him wherever his feet carried him. It just so happened his feet carried him here. To this old ramen stand he'd eaten a few times at during his academy days, not so long ago. The rain beat against the curved, tiled roof, just outside, heavy pit-pats of water, creating a soothing melody to his ears. Much to his surprise, someone joined him. The last someone he would have ever expected. Orochimaru-sama! The ramen stand owner's voice brought Sasuke's eyes to his right, where the pale ninja was currently taking a seat in the high stool beside him. Do you have sake, Tetri-san? The question was polite. A serpentine smile followed it with gleaming yellow eyes. And no, Orochimaru-sama. But I'll get some. Without another word, and a dozen, more bows than strictly necessary, Tetri marched out the back of the stand and into the rain in search of a sake bottle. The snake Sannin pulled off a pair of gloves, peeling away a cloak that was heavy with rainwater before shaking it off and placing it at the back of another stool, wide-brim hat following a moment later. Sasuke stared into the now lukewarm broth. I hear that you and your team went through quite the C-rank mission recently. Sasuke didn't answer, and just then, as though the hounds of hell were at his heels, Tetri came back, soaking wet, with sake bottle plus saucer in hand, the price tags still on both items. Orochimaru smiled in thanks, and then waved the man off. With another dozen or so bows, Tetri left, ducking back behind the divider and into his kitchen. Why are you here? Sasuke asked. To talk, of course. Orochimaru drawled, pouring himself the drink. As I said, you had quite the interesting experience, and I am secretly quite the gossip. His smile was a leer. I'm not. Sasuke hissed and proceeded to drain his bowl of its remaining broth. So let's just cut to the point, please. I'm really not prepared, suited, or even willing to dance around this and play 20 questions with you. Orochimaru chuckled. No intrigue? No subtle word games and quiet little verbose discussions. I'm disappointed, Uchiha-san. Sasuke moved to stand. A hand clamped around his shoulder, shoving him back down with a grip of iron that felt just shy of cracking his collarbone. All right. The snake soothed, patting him at the spot that still throbbed with the imprint of his fingers. Have it your way. The matter is twofold. Firstly, and most importantly, what you've witnessed. You mean Akane? Sasuke finally deigned to look at him, finding the snake, downing a whole saucer in a single gulp. Who else? He smiled, fangs, teeth, and eyes glinting. You're to repeat nothing to no one. Put it out of your mind altogether if possible. It never happened, am I making myself clear? Sasuke's eyes narrowed, and either by the impetuousness of youth, or genuine curiosity, he spoke up. Are you threatening me? Threat? Oh no. Orochimaru laughed. If these were threats, we'd be having a very, very different sort of conversation, Uchiha-san. Put it out of your mind, regardless of what your sensei does or does not tell you tomorrow. It's for the best. Sasuke worked his jaw. And the second thing? The second thing? Quite simple, really. Orochimaru smiled. You, for all intents and purposes, protected someone fairly important to me, Uchiha-san. I don't allow myself to feel indebted to anyone. As such, I'm making you a one-time only offer to learn under me. Thought you already had students. Sasuke hedged. Grown and spreading their own wings, such as they are. He smiled ruefully. I require another pet project. You seem promising enough. The Sannin paused, taking another gulp before placing the saucer down on the countertop, placing a bill that was more than enough to cover the sake saucer, Sasuke's own meal and then some. Think about it before you decide. Your current sensei I suspect will be cross with you and should you accept, but pay him no never mind. Then, without another word, he turned away, gathered his coat, gloves and wide-brim hat before marching out into the torrential rain. As for the last member of Team 7, Naruto himself was in his home, a half-dozen mission briefings and questionings behind him now. He sat in an empty apartment. Itachi had gone off on her first Hunter Nin mission just 3 days ago, leaving a note on his dining room table. He wished she was here. He wanted to talk. To apologize for letting Sasuke get hurt, to tell her about how he'd screwed up letting that one ninja slip past him to get to his team. To talk to her and hear her advice that she was so good at giving out and making the world seem that much clearer. He'd have to make it up to her when she got back. Make it up to her, and celebrate her first successful mission as a Hunter Nin. He cooked himself a quick dinner, fried eel with rice. It wasn't ramen, unfortunately, but it was quiet, allowing his mind to wander, drifting to the Hokage, Tsunade, even Orochimaru. How they'd all questioned him as to what had happened, what had gone wrong. Each one of them had a mission report from himself, his team and a half-dozen Chunin that had come to rescue them, but they wanted to hear it from his lips. Then they talked about what to do. Akane's status as a Jinchuriki was always going to get out. It was always going to become known eventually. It had to if she was going to be trained. But they, all of them, had hoped for at least a little more time for her to get the basics of ninja skills in order to give her a solid foundation before pushing her towards learning how to control Son Goku's chakra. Now her status was known, by both Sasuke, possibly Sakura, and the Chunin that had arrived to help. Orochimaru wanted their memories wiped, or at least temporarily blocked. Tsunade and Sarutobi wanted them sworn to secrecy or not informed of anything. Let them speculate away as much as they liked with no official word in either way. Naruto just wanted to tell them. He could remember his own life, his own experiences. How people kept the secret for so long it was physically painful for him to sit and wonder. How it bred isolation, resentment, disdain, and so many other negative emotions. They argued, the four of them going back and forth for what seemed like the whole day before. Finally, one of them caved. One was convinced by another viewpoint, and the decision was made. May I join you? Naruto looked up, blinking and finding Kakashi sitting across from him. Rice and eel already served. He glared. I have a door, you know, and shouldn't you be asking that before you serve yourself? Details. Kakashi chuckled. He broke his chopsticks. So. Naruto eyed him. So. How are you doing? Kakashi questioned. You really suck at this, you know? Kakashi shrugged. Itachi-chan asked me to keep an eye on you while she's gone. Never said I had to be good at it. Heard you got in quite the scrap. We did. Naruto nodded. Your girlfriend also said you have this annoying tendency to go blaming yourself whenever something even remotely bad happens to your team. Even when it isn't your fault. Naruto frowned and glared. He didn't miss her at all, he told himself. Not one bit. Stupid over-analytical Uchihas. She's not my girlfriend. He muttered. No. Kakashi smiled. She just lives with you, eats with you, looks out for you, gives you good advice and occasionally makes decisions about your life you can't ignore. He nodded. Don't you have anywhere else to be? The blonde hissed. You're right. Kakashi continued, unabated. She's not your girl fiend. She's your wife. If looks could kill. I hate you. The copy Nin laughed. He looked at him, single eye, still crinkled in amusement. Seriously though. I know it can be tough when a mission goes ape shit and someone on the team gets hurt. If you need to vent, talk, or just a good sparring partner to punch for a bit, I'm free till Itachi-chan gets back, kid. Naruto took a breath. Thanks, sensei. If Kakashi noticed the slip, mercifully, he let it slide. But I'll be alright. I feel the worst for Sakura, but Tsunade said she'll heal her scars, so no permanent damage. I'll just have to train them better than I've been doing. It was a Jounin team, Naruto. Kakashi reminded. You took on 5. That's something even I would have had some trouble doing. The fact that your kids were able to take on one after barely 6 months under your teaching speaks volumes of how far you've come. I doubt anyone else would have taught them better. Naruto didn't say anything. Once again, mercifully, Kakashi let him eat in silence. The next day came slowly. Hardly any of the members of Team 7 truly could say they'd slept that night, 1,000 thoughts marching round and round in their heads before each woke, bathed, ate, and dressed before stepping out of their respective places to meet with each other. When they finally arrived at the training grounds, they weren't empty. Tsunade, Orochimaru, Dan, Akane, and Hiruzen. They were all waiting for them. Or more specifically, Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto marched up beside the trio of legendary ninja, taking his place at Akane's side, and placing a hand on the downtrodden girl's shoulder. Sasuke arrived shortly after. He stared at the arrayed cast of powerful shinobi, feeling incredibly small in their presence, even as he put steel in his spine to stand straighter, waiting for Sakura. When she arrived, Sasuke, and even Naruto, received their first surprise of the day. Sakura. Naruto breathed. Your dash. I offered to remove the scarring. Tsunade said. She didn't want me to. Just fix the eye. Why? The question came from Sasuke, even as Sakura smiled sadly at him. It's... She paused. A reminder. The scar was a terrible thing. 2 or 3 dozen razor blades had seemingly slid across the side of her face, catching her upper cheekbone, up to her temple and all the way back to her ear and hairline. Neither Sasuke or Naruto knew what to say to that. Hiruzen, the Hokage, cleared his throat before anything more could be said, and all eyes turned to him. With 2 solid claps of his hands, there was a ripple of chakra from the older man. Now we will enjoy some privacy, he said, taking a long drag of his pipe. Haruno-san. Uchiha-san. No doubt you've gathered that we're all here to speak on the events of your previous mission. Yes, Hokage-sama, Sakura answered, taking her place beside Sasuke and standing at parade rest, hands clasped behind her back. The fact of the matter is, the 2 of you have become aware of one of this village's most tightly guarded secrets. Sarutobi continued. Years ago, Orochimaru, along with his team, of which your sensei Naruto was a part of, defeated one of Iwagakure's 2 Jinchuriki. A man named Rashi, and killed him. A Jinchuriki is a shinobi who, at a very young age, through a particular ritual, had a great and terrible power sealed within their bodies. After Rashi's defeat, we claimed his body, took the power within him, and sealed it within Akane. Sakura finished, her mind putting the pieces together as quickly as Sasuke himself was. Quite. Sarutobi drawled. Frankly, neither of you were supposed to learn of this, or deduce it until much later, if ever. Jinchuriki are powerful, and a very limited number. Each one is a treasure to the village, bearing a great responsibility. Throughout his speech, Sasuke took notice of the fact that both Tsunade and Orochimaru's faces had tightened, their eyes narrowing in clear signs of anger. There was a story here, one no sane man should touch with a 10-foot pole. Still, his mouth was faster than his brain, and it had spoken before he'd realized the words weren't just in his head. You're saying she's a target, all of these Jinchuriki are. Sarutobi nodded. How many are in Konoha? Sakura asked. You said IWA had 2. How many do we have? Including Akane 2 as well. Sarutobi breathed smoke between his teeth. Naruto-sensei's the second, right? Sakura kept going, missing the way the aforementioned blonde stiffened. That's why you wanted Naruto-sensei to train her? Sarutobi took a deep, slow breath. Correct. Sasuke looked towards Naruto, who currently seemed to be doing everything but looking at the 2 of them. Given this knowledge, Sarutobi continued, I am offering each of you a choice. That made the 2 of them look at each other. The risk you were placed in was thrust upon you without your knowledge, Sarutobi said. You may choose to remain on this team, or be transferred to another effective immediately. They're my team. Naruto suddenly spoke up through grit teeth, clearly angry at the thought. Clearly, this was an argument they'd already had. The choice must be theirs, Naruto. Hiruzen shot back without even looking at him. For a good, long while, no one said a word. Naruto wouldn't be our sensei anymore? It was Sakura who asked, her voice coming out with more than a little sadness. Naruto's expertise, his skills and services must be used to aid Akane in her developing power. I am sorry, but should you choose to transfer to another team, it will be you that leaves. Not her. Sasuke saw how Akane, The sweet little girl seemed to flinch, her eyes still downcast. She hadn't spoken a single word so far. For so long he'd been wondering what was going on. What all this was about. Now he knew. All the pieces fitting into place, all the little events becoming clear in their context. He thought. He thought long and hard about his next words. In the end, the answer was clear. They didn't come looking for a Jinchuriki, he said. All eyes turned to him. The most powerful ninja in the village focusing on his words. They came looking for a Senju, he said, looking to the girl. As if feeling his eyes on her, Akane finally brought her eyes up to meet his, flinching at his cold stare. The ninja were never looking for you because of that power. They were just looking for you. You yourself were always the danger, regardless. She flinched at his words, at his tone, and he saw Tsunade's fists clenching behind her back. He stepped forward, closer, and kneeling on one knee in front of her to see her at eye level. Looks to me that, Jinchuriki or not, the risk hasn't changed one bit from when you were just Akane. There was a pause, eyes turning this way and that way in slight confusion. Nothing's changed, he repeated. I'm still your teammate. Finally, he allowed a smile to tug at his lips. So long as you don't try to braid my hair again. Risk comes with the job, Sakura finally said, stepping forward just like he had, and sitting cross-legged to be at eye level with their pint-sized teammate. It'll take more than a few scratches for you to get rid of either of us, Kane-chan. Without another word, the two genin of Team 7 found themselves wrapped up in the strongest hug the 6-year-old could muster, one arm wrapping around each of their necks as she openly sobbed into their clothes. Sakura giggled, trying not to cry herself while Sasuke patted the girl on the back. Standing just a bit apart, Naruto watched, blue eyes lingering over the three of them as he smiled, the light of the sun casting his own face in shade to Sakura, who dared to offer a look his way. Sasuke was smiling gently, and Sakura's face was scarred. They were not the same. The differences were stark and yet, never more insignificant. Perfect, came the thought to Naruto's mind. They are both perfect. When the tears were dried up, and the touching moment had passed, it was Sasuke that stood up first. I do, however, have a request. And what is that? Hiruzen asked, the faintest hint of a smile on his own lips. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, it's not a request to you. Sasuke continued before rounding on Tsunade of all people, staring the woman dead in the eye as he spoke his next words. All I remember of that fight is the fact that Naruto, Sakura, and Akane were all hurt, and I couldn't do a single goddamn thing to help any of them when they needed it. He paused, placing palm and fist together before bowing as formally as he was able towards the woman. Tsunade-sama. I never want to feel that useless towards my teammates again. I would like to train under you as a medic ninja once I finish my training under Naruto and become a chunin. If Tsunade was surprised by the request, as Naruto certainly was, she didn't show it. Look at me, boy. Sasuke brought his eyes up, meeting hers unflinchingly. Her voice, like her gaze, was steel. My training isn't easy. I don't want easy. Sasuke shot back. This isn't something to do in a year or two. This is a commitment. So is my team. She smiled. Good answer. Then, she nodded. All right then. I'll give you a shot, Uchiha? She raised a single, manicured finger. 1. Don't blow it. He bowed again. That's all I'll need. Well now. The serpentine, amused voice of Orochimaru made itself known. I can't have something like that happening without an answer. Tisk tisk, Sasuke-kun. Snubbing my generous offer for my teammates' attentions. Sasuke straightened. I meant no often dash. Orochimaru waved him off. I said to think about it, and you've done so. Then his eyes trailed down, towards the still-sitting Sakura. And how about you, little Kunoichi? Are you as ambitious as your teammate? He offered her a hand. Naruto glared at him. Sakura looked at the offered hand, blinking before looking back up towards him. Why you think I'm good enough to train under you? Orochimaru smirked. No, came the hiss. But I'm always up to surpass my own expectations. And of course, little Akane will get only the best as long as I have a say in it. Sakura dash. But before Naruto could get a word in edgewise, she reached up, taking the hand before Orochimaru yanked her to her feet, shaking it with a firm grip. The deal is made then. He laughed before letting her go. I suggest the two of you reach Chunin soon. The exams are just 3 months away. He grinned at Sarutobi and the glowering Naruto. More than enough time to prepare. Wouldn't you agree, Sensei? Whatever inside joke he was spinning was lost on Sakura before he turned and left, chuckling as he marched into the forest before shortly vanishing in its shadows. Chapter 45. It was decidedly strange, Naruto concluded, that he would be the one, for once, to be wary, to be advocating for taking things slow and cautious while his team was ready to go in, guns blazing. It wasn't that he wasn't confident in their skills, or his ability to help them, not at all. In fact, he knew both Sasuke and Sakura were better prepared for this exam than his Sasuke and Sakura had ever been. And he knew that this time the odds weren't stacked against them with Orochimaru of all people hunting them down through the forest. Of course, Orochimaru had his sights set on Sakura after the exam, but that was a bridge he was willing to cross when he got to it. But to digress, the problem, really, was that it was the Chunin exam. If there was one event, one moment Naruto could point to where the whole world had started to go to hell in a handbasket for him and his team, it was this exam. Where Orochimaru first put the curse seal on Sasuke, where Sakura felt the first niggling insecurities of inadequacy, where Sasuke first started to get jealous of his increasing abilities, where he himself had started to see Sasuke's jealousy and had lashed out because of it. All of it was tied back to this exam. So, yes, he was nervous. It wasn't logical or rational, considering all the other factors that had coincided to bring about the whole sequence of events that had no chance of happening here, but emotions didn't run on logic. "You guys sure about this?" he asked, for what felt like the 100th time as he handed them the papers. Sasuke sighed. "Naruto, be honest with us. Are we ready?" "Yes." "Then why are you so nervous?" the Uchiha asked. "A lot of reasons," he hedged. "Not the least of which is Sakura-chan being so eager to go train with Orochimaru of all people." "You trained with him?" Sakura shot back, questioning his dislike of the honored Sannin again, similarly for the 100th time. "Why don't you like Rokiku and Naruto?" Akane now questioned. Again Naruto ran a hand down his face. "Look, Sakura." Akane: "Yes, he's strong. Yes, I trained as his Genin student, but I don't trust the guy. It's not about like or dislike, it's about trust. And Orochimaru, more than anything else, is dangerous and untrustworthy." But this was just a rehash of an old conversation. One he'd had over and over again with a plethora of people, from Sarutobi, to Tsunade, to Ryoko and Kyofa. How to explain that this most famous and powerful Konoha ninja that had been a legend for their entire lives was quite literally a coiled snake that could snap right back around and sink its fangs into them at any moment. The very idea of Orochimaru turning traitor was downright inconceivable to them. That very same idea is one Orochimaru exploited back in his timeline to run terrible experiments unchecked and unsuspected till they'd caught him. They wouldn't listen. So he'd just have to keep his eyes open for them. All right, he rubbed his forehead. "These forms are all permission slips that your parents have to sign to let you sign up for the exams. Take your time because we still have a few months, which we're going to use to prepare you guys even more." This time, he allowed himself a grin as he sat down, pushing the cloud that was Orochimaru out of his thoughts as his teammates/students sat around him. "All right, Sasuke. Yeah? You want to train to be a med nin. I get that, but I don't really know any med techniques, so I can't really help you on that front. So you'll have to settle for being the team's ninjutsu specialist. You're the one with two affinities that work best for mid to long range, lightning and fire, so you've got versatility." The Uchiha nodded. "I hear you. Don't worry. Learning is learning and techniques are techniques. Just because I want to do something doesn't mean I'm not gonna learn anything else." Naruto nodded, a satisfied smile on his face before turning to Sakura. He opened his mouth to speak when Sakura's hand shot up. He clicked his mouth shut. "Yes? I want to learn trap making, stealth, and kenjutsu," she said. Naruto blinked. "Come again?" "My best skill right now is trap making," Sakura said. "But my traps were still detected by that Jounin. I have to make my traps better. To make better traps, I need better stealth. They kinda go hand in hand, and with my reserves I'll never be a ninjutsu powerhouse, and you don't know many genjutsu, Naruto." She stuck out her tongue at him. "So for the Chunin exam, it'll be best to focus on these." Naruto felt a smile tugging at his lips. "Got this all planned out, huh?" "I always do my homework," she smiled back. He nodded. "I can help with all that, But you are going to up your reserves and you are going to learn ninjutsu as well. Just because you can't be the best at it, doesn't mean you shouldn't practice it. She nodded, seemingly understanding the message. Now, Akane's hand shot up. Will I be learning how to dash? He flicked her nose. No. Ow. She glared at him. He smiled. One mistake a lot of Jinchuriki make is learning how to use that power so early they neglect everything else. It becomes less a tool, and more of a crutch that hurts them in the end. Orochimaru took down Roki because Roki didn't know how to do anything other than his one-trick pony show. Learn the trick and you win. That's not gonna happen to you. With Sasuke being the long-range guy here, and Sakura running the role of saboteur/support, you Kane-chan are going to take on a very important job. What? She smiled. Frontline taijutsu. There was a momentary silence. She's 6. Sasuke deadpanned. So was I when I did it. Naruto smiled. She's 6. Sasuke repeated. I think what Sasuke-kun is trying to say, Naruto dash. Sakura ventured. Is that Akane-chan doesn't have the muscle mass to really be a taijutsu person yet. Oh. She definitely doesn't. Naruto agreed. But she's got something better, she's small. Yes. She is small. She is 6-inch. Sasuke bit out, with a fire affinity that's stronger than virtually anyone in the village. Go on. Naruto laughed. Gee, thanks Sasuke. Look. You won't have the raw power to punch people out, Akane, and you can't really tank a hit from a big bad guy. But your size is a big advantage if you add in plenty of speed and your fire affinity to give you that stopping power you just don't have. So you're going to learn how to fit in your taijutsu with as much of your fire element as possible. I have permission to burn people? Sakura looked more than a little disturbed at the sheer giddiness in her tone. That concern grew to outright horror at Naruto's megawatt bright smile and chirpy response. Charbroiled. Amigakure is not what Itachi had expected, truth be told. Lesser villages were considered lesser for a reason. Less people, less money, less military, something held them back from being a force that could rival the 5 greater shinobi nations. As such, she hadn't expected much more than a few ramshackle townships and hamlets, sparsely populated fields with 1 or 2 true villages the nation could call its own. Amigakure was a city, easily 3 times Konoha's size, with a network of dizzying, high architecture. It felt as though she'd been stepping into an alien world when she first arrived. It didn't take her long to realize, however, that most of this place was empty. Buildings languished as gutted hovels, the higher floors were rusted and falling apart, with the occasional piece of debris falling loose and finding its way down to the village floor. The people were spread out, scattered, divided by buildings and city sectors as they huddled together in small pockets of community. 2 or 3 dozen tiny tribes in the envelope of the city limits that coexisted and cooperated with one another when times allowed it. She posed as a traveling merchant when she entered, a wagon full of goods for trade behind her with little more than a visible dirk to defend herself from any thieves or bandits. She did not dare use a henge, or much chakra, remembering Naruto's stories of their god Pain, controlling all through the rain. She wasn't sure if he still existed at all in this timeline, but better safe than sorry in her mind. Only when the rains abated did she allow herself the luxury of roaming around the city, questioning others in quiet corners, listening in on conversations and gathering information. Amigakure is not what Itachi had expected. It is not at all what Naruto himself recalled from his own time. Katan, Gokaku no Jutsu, Sasuke's shout bounced off the trees of the training ground, a gout of flame bursting from his lips to coat the clearing in fire. Or at least it should have. With a swirl that seemed like the air grabbed his attack and twisted it into a ball, Sasuke watched, with no small amount of irritation as the fire was literally sucked into Akane's own mouth before she spat it back out at him, in a fireball 3 times as large. An earth wall sprang up in front of him, a split second before he would have been caught in the blast, giving him enough time to form the hand seals for his next attack before using the wall as a springboard to leap high into the sky. The lightning crackled between his fingertips, forking through the air before lancing down to the ground around Akane, missing her completely. God damn it! He cursed. Don't aim like you normally would! Naruto cried from somewhere. Lightning does whatever it wants, you have to force it to go where you want it to. Don't give it a choice. It's an inanimate energy with no consciousness. It doesn't have a choice. He snapped back, frustrated at needing to be told how to do the technique for a 5th time. Then stop missing! He hit the ground hard, just in time to see a miniature ball of red hair with hands aflame rushing right towards him in a deadhead charge. She pounced. Too late. With a yank down into the earth, Sasuke was underground, closing his eyes and holding his breath for a moment before Sakura shoved him back up a safe distance away. Taking a moment to get his bearings and identify where Akane was, to his left, the Uchiha came up with a plan. Drawing his kunai, he tossed it. A second later, he formed the familiar hand seals again. Katan, Gokaku no Jutsu. Just like before, the fireball burst out and was swallowed up, ready to be spat back out at him at 3 times the size. He waited. With her chest puffed up, the youngest member of the team screamed as she let out his own attack against him. And Sasuke replaced himself with the kunai he tossed. Hovering above the ground for a split second, he adjusted himself in midair, spinning once, twice, and bringing his heel down on Akane's back. With a surprised squawk and a coughing sputter, the Jinchuriki hit the ground face first as Sasuke's feet found the dirt. Oh! Came the piteous whine. There was a slow clap. Not bad, Naruto said, finally pulling himself free of wherever he'd been hiding/supervising, Sakura marching out of her own hiding spot a second later. Sasuke turned, bending down to pick up Akane and place her back on her feet. He hadn't hit her that hard, but he really wasn't sure what the proper strength threshold of a 6-year-old was. Tsunade's daughter seemed a little out of it as she rubbed her head. Did Sakura-chan hit me? She asked. Were you looking out for Sakura-chan? Naruto asked. No. Then she may have. He smiled. So, what did you do wrong? Not looking out for Sakura-chan? That was part of it. Naruto nodded. But you really messed up on 2 things. 1. Focusing too much on Sasuke, making it easy for Sakura-chan to hide. And 2. Focusing too much on turning Sasuke's attack back on him. But it's so much easier. I hardly use any chakra. It's done real fast, and it's so big without Sakura-chan's earth wall I'd dash, and you lost. Naruto interrupted. Sasuke knew you'd try doing it again, and he knew that you would stand still for the 2.5 it would take you to do it. So he knew what you were gonna do, how you were gonna do it, and he baited you so he could get you. He poked her in the head. It's not about how strong the jutsu is. It's about using them smart. Okay? Okay. She nodded, looking more than a little put off. As for you guys. Sakura-chan, nice interference work. He smiled. Now Sasuke, where did you screw up? My technique, for the 5th time. He growled. Well, kinda yeah, but I mean besides that. Sasuke raised his eyes skyward, thinking. Then he shrugged. I got noting. You screwed up because you were completely reliant on Sakura to bail you out of your screw-ups. He said. Don't get me wrong, she did real well, and that's her role on the team, but Sakura won't always be there. If she ever screws up, is being attacked herself or anything else, you can't just get caught with your pants down standing head first in front of an attack. She's a safety net. Not a crutch. Sasuke nodded, conceding the point. You're right. Naruto smiled at the 3, noting that Sakura was trying to not look at all smug about not getting a reprimand. He could burst that bubble, but I let her have this one. Okay, so. He pulled out 3 straws. Let's draw, and see who gets the short one for tomorrow. The members of Team 7 each reached forward, plucking a single straw out of his hand and holding them aloft. Hey! Sakura-chan drew the short one today. He smiled. About time. Sasuke grunted, only to receive a punch to his bicep courtesy of the kunoichi in question. Shut up. First time going 2-on-1 or not, you guys better get ready to lose tomorrow. Nah. Akane shook her head. The first one to win the 2-on-1 is gonna be me, MH. She stuck out her tongue. Sakura stuck out her tongue right back. Looks like I'm gonna be making both of you eat your words. Hey, Naruto. Sasuke suddenly said, catching the blonde's attention. Huh? Yes, Sasuke? Do you know where the Chunin exams are gonna be? He asked. I mean, it's definitely not gonna be in IWA. Suna had it last time if I'm not mistaken, so that would just leave Kumo, Konoha, and Kiri. If it's here, that's fine, but if it's in Kumo or Kiri, maybe we should add something to this. Train by a river, or maybe somewhere where the air is thinner or… He shrugged. I dunno. Something to emulate the climate difference. Might give us an edge, or at least negate a disadvantage. Huh. Naruto blinked. That's not a bad idea actually. I'll have to see what I can find out. It was a day or two later when he found out it was going to be held in Kumo. Despite himself, Naruto was honestly kind of excited. He'd never been to Kumo this time around, and the chance to meet B and his other friends from Kumo was something he was definitely looking forward to. Of course, he knew he'd have to play it carefully. B, A, and the others, like Sasuke and Sakura, were not the same people and were hardly just going to be his friend at the drop of a hat. Well, B might. But better to hope for the best and prepare the worst, or however that went. Wasn't gonna stop him from making them his friends, he'd just have to try a little harder at it. There was, however, a real note of concern. From what he'd found out, there were people coming. A lot of people. A lot of important people. Very important people. Sarutobi, Tsunade, Orochimaru, at least 5 other teams from Konoha that he knew about, 4 teams from Kiri, along with Mei, and her own guards, probably Kisame and Zabusa, the Kazekage, 3 teams from Suna, and even the new Tsuchikage and the 3 daimyo of Kumo, Iwa and Konoha. Naruto wasn't the sharpest knife in the holster, but even he knew this wasn't just some Chunin exam. This was the equivalent of a summit meeting of all the great powers. Either one last-ditch effort to avoid a war, or the official start of one. Their fight with Iwa was currently just between Iwa and Konoha. But after these exams, that theater could spread to other areas. It wouldn't take much to push the countries to a full-on war. Iwa and Konoha were already at war, with Suna allied to one and Kumo having built up its military for the past decade. Both were teetering on the brink of open conflict themselves. The only wild card here was Kirigakure. Honestly, he didn't know what to do. A part of him felt like some kind of parent watching his kids getting into a stupid fight. He just wanted to punch everyone over the head a few times and tell them how stupid and wasteful this was. But that was impossible. He didn't have the standing, or the power for that. He just have to watch. Watch and try to protect his friends as best he could. Chapter 46. They were going to arrive in an hour. That wasn't the time they were to arrive by happenstance either. The Reikage had sent messengers to all the parties that would be attending in advance, setting a specific date, a specific hour, and even down to a very specific set of coordinates. Anyone not in attendance at the specified date, time, and place would automatically forfeit all their team's participation and revoke their invitation. No questions asked? At this particular instance, Naruto hated being right. This was no ordinary Chunin exam. They moved with a virtual army of people. No less than 5 Konoha teams were signed up to participate, including his own, along with Kurenai and Gai's teams. Shikamaru, Ino, and Chuji weren't going because A. Shikamaru didn't want to make the trip, and B. Sarutobi needed someone to take over his responsibilities while he was gone. With Tsunade and Orochimaru here at his side as a statement/show of force, Asuma was the closest thing to a replacement currently available in the village. But mostly because Shikamaru didn't want to make the trip. Lazy bastard. With 5 teams, there was of course Sarutobi himself, 4 Umbu guards, Tsunade, Orochimaru, and of course Magajiro Kutu and his entire procession of 20 elite samurai and 4 of the Fire Guardian bodyguards. This was not exactly a force of Hinokuni anyone could easily scoff at. And to think, the others were all bringing similar displays. This was a powder keg just itching to blow up. Small wonder A was treating it like live Bijou dropping in front of his door. Oh. Hey. Bijou. That meant he was probably going to see B again. B would definitely be able to beat the ever-loving shit out of anyone who tried to start Dash. Naruto Dash. It's Sakura that draws his attention. Standing to his left, he spies Sasuke and Akane off a bit further, with Hinata, Shino, and Kiba, with Akamaru perched on Akane's head. Kiba's sulking. Naruto smiles. Yes, Sakura-chan? Have you ever been to Kumo? She asks, rubbing at her arms with a nervous shiver. I mean, all the things we've been hearing from some of the other teams. And they even tried to kidnap Hinata-chan once. Naruto's smile dropped. Looking at the girl who half looked like she wanted to call the whole thing off and head back home. Honestly? She nodded. He sighed. I have a few friends in Kumo. He answered, not exactly lying, but not exactly being truthful either. But don't let that fool you guys or anything, this Dash. He gestured around them to the array of powerful ninja. This is not normal, and not normal is dangerous. So keep on your toes, stick with Hinata-chan's team as much as you can inside the village and during the exam. memorize all friendly faces and names, and you come find me if anything happens. Okay? She nodded, and he hoped she truly understood the gravity of this situation. Hours later, A watched them arrive. He watched them all arrive. None would have dared miss this meeting, and none would have dared breach his instructions. They all arrived within seconds of each other. Hai no Kuni, of course, was the first. Stepping out of the surrounding foliage and into the ruins of this, the remains of Kumogakure's first official border outpost, before they even really knew what their border could be to them at the founding of the village, A spied Magajiro Kutu astride his black horse, a column of samurai at his back, their banner waving in the wind, the 5 genin teams trailing behind them in an orderly line. He blinked, and realized in that split second that the Konoha ninja were there now, already in place. The Umbu guard within 30 paces of him, flanking Kutu's path like an honor guard, a few others on the rooftops with Sarutobi, Orochimaru and Tsunade standing around 15 paces away, just inside the main courtyard. I was not one for overconfidence, that got you killed, but being caught so completely unaware by genjutsu was humbling, to say the very least. Sarutobi might not be in his prime, able to match him in speed or strength, but clearly the man wasn't called the god of shinobi for no reason. Hiruzen was still a very, very dangerous enemy. Still, he said nothing, and with the warning given he began fluctuating his own chakra to avoid future lapses. Kiri was next. Terumi Mei was not joined by a daimyo. Even so, there was no doubt she was taking this just as seriously. A spied Hashige Kisame, Zabuza Momohi, 6 Umbu guards and 3 genin teams of her own. Next was IWA. The tension that fell onto this deserted place could have risen up and choked every last one of them. A spied Inoki's replacement, recognizing the man donning the robes as Inoki's son, Kitsuchi. A jounin of some renown. But A did not consider him the worth of a Kage. Not yet at least. People tended to grow into those shoes. Though this one would have to grow quickly given his nation's current situation. Standing beside him was Haran Michiza, the daimyo of Tsuchi no Kuni, with full honor guard like Kutu, Umbu and no less than 7 genin teams of their own. This test was going to become a bloodbath. Right behind them came Suna. The Kazakage had brought a small entourage by comparison. Then again, they were the nation farthest from Kumogakure. The leaders of all 5 villages and 2 of the 5 daimyo, standing in a single place, with 2 of them looking for all the world as though they were ready to fight each other to the death right here. Powder Keg didn't even begin to describe it. Slowly, A stood up from where he'd been sitting, the chair he'd been using giving a creak of relief as all 200+ pounds of muscle finally lifted itself off of it. He stepped forward into the center courtyard. "Stay back," Naruto said in a half-whisper, half-hiss to his team, watching as they stood in a square formation with the other genin. He knew that they'd gotten instructions. But damn if this didn't set him on edge. Hell, everyone was on edge. He saw Kuti get off from his horse, fully armed and armored as they stepped into the courtyard, flanked by 1 IWA ninja and the young woman Naruto could recognize as Yujito. He hadn't ever met her. She died before he could. Naruto wished would have brought B instead, someone Naruto could hopefully use or bounce off of to break the tension if the situation got bad. As though driven by some quiet accord, everyone began marching into this place. In their group, the genin, most of the samurai, and 2 jounin staying back, out of earshot and out of danger. It was Kutu, Orochimaru, Tsunade, Sarutobi, 2 samurai guard, 4 of the fire guardians, and every jounin sensei that stepped forward. Other villages were similar, though he noted that Suna didn't march forward any of the jounin sensei. He spied Baki in the group, but did not readily spot Gaara, Temari, or Kankuro. Were they keeping him back to spring as a surprise if things got bad? That would be consistent with what he remembered of the way Gaara was treated at this point in time. He panned his eyes around towards Kiri, catching a myriad of familiar faces, Zabuza, Kisame, Haku, which was surprising. She caught his eye, offering a small, hesitant smile. He tried to smile back. He wasn't sure it was a good one. Then, on IWA, Naruto could feel his heart sinking into a pit. He'd sensed her earlier, but he'd hoped to be wrong. Kuratsuchi was there. Staring resolutely ahead of her, back with the part of the IWA group that had stayed at the edge of the courtyard, Naruto could see that she was coiled tighter than a taut bowstring. The anger radiating off of her was a palpable thing. She didn't look at him. She knew he was there, but she didn't look at him. He almost missed the cue for his part of the group to stop walking, only managing to catch it at the very last second as Orochimaru, Tsunade, Sarutobi and Kuta kept moving forward. As the various leaders all came within striking distance of each other, there was a tense hush across the deserted courtyard, as though the very bones of this place were aware of the gravity of it all. "It seems we're all here," Naruto heard Ace speak. "How could we afford to miss all this?" It was Terumi Mei who answered. Sarutobi couldn't help but note that her voice reminded him of his long-dead wife. It was an odd thought, out of place and perhaps nostalgic. Even so, he couldn't help but smile very lightly at the memory as he bit on the end of his pipe. He had no doubt that she, of all people, was indeed going to get the most out of this. Before, when Kirigakure had been opening the talks of trade negotiations, they were doing it on the back foot, with their village needing others to assist their economy. Now, with war on their hands, he had absolutely no doubt whatsoever that she would be milking the strength of Kirigakure's military, a strength that could easily tip the balance of the war to come, for all it was worth. She smelled blood in the water, and like the shark in the ocean, she was going to feed. "You're hoping this will be a fruitful exam?" he prodded, allowing a small smile on his features. Translation: "Are you looking to make a deal?" "Oh." She laughed, the sound low in her throat, sultry even. "I have no doubt it will be. Either with you, or your enemy." He breathed in his pipeweed. He expected no less, of course. "Confident in your genin, are you?" Kuta laughed, content, Sarutobi knew, to slip back into the easy role of fool now that all eyes were on Orochimaru, Tsunade and himself. "Enough!" A suddenly hissed, cutting off the game of suggestions and wordplay before it could truly get started. The Raikage never did have the patience for it. Pity, it had been so long since Sarutobi had new faces and fresh minds to dance around. He feared he was getting rusty with the steps. He'd been hoping to practice. "We all know why we're here. And I say that this is either the time, or the place to do this." "What better time?" Hiruzen wanted to ask, but refrained. A's moods were usually categorized under angry and furious, neither of which he had any interest in poking yet. Kumo was the greatest threat currently in this war. In truth, Sarutobi knew that the only reason Kumo had not officially declared war on Konohagakure already was the utterly humiliating defeat IWA had suffered at their hands. To lose their Kage, be assaulted in the heart of their village, and have nearly a fifth of their total military force wiped out in what was essentially the opening of the war, was not something that gave Kumogakure confidence in their usual allies of convenience. They were biding their time, waiting for Konoha to wear itself down, or for IWA to begin handing them defeats before fully committing to utilizing this military engine that they'd been building up over the past decade. When Kumo decided to attack, if Hiruzen did not have Kiri in his back pocket, or worse, had them as an enemy, things would get problematic, to say the very least. He watched the Raikage as the man growled. "This is simple. All of you want to kill each other, fine. Kill each other after these exams. Outside my walls. Outside my borders. If anyone, and I mean anyone, is found to have attacked, or even planning to attack another party during your stay at this village, Kumogakure will immediately declare war on the guilty party. I don't care what your reasons or who you are. Do I make myself clear?" Sarutobi had many years of experience in the art of politics, even more in the art of schooling one's expression and body language to hide obvious signs of emotion. He struggled right now. I had just given them a warning, and he just lit the proverbial fuse on the biggest goddamn bomb imaginable. Certainly, he could find someone trying to do something in his village and declare war straight away. Or he could find some planted evidence that pointed him to an innocent party. IWA could frame Konoha, Konoha could frame IWA, Kiri could frame anyone they felt would suit their needs. Even Suna, Konoha's official allies, were not above the lure of the game. And now that he thought about it, removing Kumogakure and Kiri entirely from the picture by having them target Kiri was an option Sarutobi could see IWA opting towards. He was tempted to go for that last option too, truth be told. This had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. And yet, with the Chunin exam treaty currently under the envelope of his village's jurisdiction, he really didn't have a choice. If something happened and he allowed it without reprisal, he himself would be in violation of the agreement, with all the economic sanctions that entailed. Honestly, he should have expected no different. But even if he would have, to expect it and actually see it were two very different things. Hell, even Kumo itself could frame an innocent party and have justification to go to war and brand said party as the ones that broke the Chunin exam treaty. He could see the gears turning, see everyone's minds coming to the same conclusions, acknowledging the same dangers. This was certainly going to be a Chunin exam where the excitement would all be held firmly outside of the competition. At least, he hoped so. Chapter 47. Kumogakure wasn't like anything Sakura had ever seen in her life. Of course, by textbooks and history she knew every village had its own distinct architecture and design meant to utilize the natural advantages of their homelands. Most villages couldn't afford the banal design of Konohagakure when they were founded. Too easy and simple to attack using conventional means. But Konoha once had Hashirama and Madara. No one in their right mind would even dream of laying siege to it. And even more than them, it had the forest. Miles upon miles of endless trees where armies could be ambushed, enemy scouts could be caught in illusions to lead them astray, wide-scale techniques made in conjunction could bog down an invasion force and stop it in its tracks. Konoha didn't need strange architecture to protect it. But with that practicality, Konoha had really missed out on the simple wow factor Kumogakure sported. With buildings encircling the peaks, cresting the mountains like rings of thorny crowns, sky bridges that connected the 5 massive mountain points, and a sloping walkway that seemed to reach up into the sky as the primary entrance, Sakura could very easily envision any real effort to invade this village would need to be something so grossly overwhelming as to make it impractical altogether. True, there were several small towns and hamlets at the foot of the mountain that they'd passed that Sakura imagined to be the bulk of Kumogakure's population, food production, and trading hubs. But even so, this was impressive. As they were escorted through the skyways and into buildings with massive glass panes to let them look out into the absolutely gorgeous view, she realized something. She was hungry. And after nearly a straight week of rations, hard ground, dirt, tree roots, and other such commonalities found on the road, she found that she was really looking forward to a hot shower, a warm bed, and some good food which she'd hopefully never tried before. Luckily, before she broke any kind of decorum by asking such an unladylike thing like "Where's the food at?" Sasuke, precious handsome Sasuke, seemed to share her sentiments. "Hey Naruto, when do you think we'll be getting something to eat?" And that, as they say, is when the proverbial dam broke. With that question, their sensei actually seemed to realize that he too was in fact hungry. Something which he immediately began to make known to everyone around him. On his insistent questioning, it was revealed that they were all headed to the Raikage Tower, to be dismissed. Specifically, everyone was accompanying the Kage and the daimyo to the tower where they would continue negotiations in private. To which their ever so eloquent, tactful, and diplomatic sensei answered, "That's stupid. Can we just go here? I smell food." She wasn't sure how exactly it worked, but it really was fascinating to watch him, as he didn't exactly receive an answer from any of the Kage before proceeding to invite everyone from their village within earshot to go eat. Sakura's brain kind of screeched to a dead halt for a moment, when he also proceeded to invite Haku-chan, a girl from Kiri that Sakura had never seen before in her life. He carried out this invitation, of course with the utmost tact. Namely, shouldering and shoving his way through the crowd of Kiri ninja until he found Haku, grabbed her by the hand, and proceeded to pull her along. And throughout this whole process, somewhere in the back of Sakura's mind, at some point, she began to realize something. There's no way he's getting away with this. And we're all gonna die here because our sensei's an idiot. Of course, she was wrong. Not about the idiot part, oh no. He was definitely an idiot. She was wrong because it had, somehow, worked. And now they, as in, she, Sasuke, Akane, Guy's team, Kurenai's team, and that Haku girl with her team were currently making their way through this sector of the village searching for the nearest restaurants. All the other sensei had also seemed to go their own way, either to secure their hotels, or search for food in another direction. So, here they were, all 16 of them. She could picture them making quite the spectacle as they moved through the wide hallways of these mezzanine-like buildings. "So when do you think they met?" The whisper came from behind her, and Sakura craned her head around to find Tenten and Hinata whispering to each other. Well, Tenten was whispering. Hinata was making hand signs so fast Sakura could barely read them, only managing to understand the mouthed words that went along with it. "Oh, I know," Tenten answered. "A Kiri Kunoichi and a Konoha ninja, it's like right out of those romance novels." And just like that, Sakura's brain came to a dead stop. Well, it tried. The brakes failed, and it ended up crashing into a brick wall before bursting into flames. She whipped her head around, looking for her wayward sensei/friend/moron, finding him, just as she suspected, chatting up the Kiri Kunoichi. The two of them smiling and grinning like they weren't members of two completely different villages, inside of a possibly hostile foreign territory, about to enter an exam where their students might end up killing each other. She was about to step forward when, suddenly, a hand grasped the back of her shirt, pulling her back with a startled squawk. "All right, Sakura, spill!" Tenten demanded. "Spill what? How long has your sensei been dating Tall Pale and Kiri over there?" "Naruto isn't dating he dash." Hinata flashed some hand signs. "Yeah, I know he seems chummy with her but dash." More hand signs. "Yeah, long-distance relationships can work but dash." A few more. "It's not impossible but dash." Slightly behind the three girls, Akane was walking beside Niji, chewing on a piece of Pocky that she'd managed to stash away in her bag where no one would find it. "What are they talking about?" she asked. "It's fascinating, really," Niji answered her. "The conversation started barely 5 minutes ago, and Sakura has only officially joined it about 45 seconds ago. But in that time they've gone from questioning the nature of the relationship, the existence of a romantic relationship, the potential for it to work out, how good-looking their children would be, to how these forbidden romances always end in tragedy. And now we're on the potential for it all to work out and how they can convince Haku-san to defect." Akane blinked. "I haven't heard any of that." "That's because Hinata-sama is the one doing most of the talking. It's actually rather impressive. If she could be this fast in her taijutsu, no one would touch her." The youngest Senju decided not to question that. The kage of all 5 villages, and the daimyo of 2 of the 5 greater states were seated in a single room. It was a spacious thing, floored and walled with dark grain wood, almost black. The seats they were given were plush leather things meant for leisure, not business. Scented incense gave the room a pleasant scent, while the smoke covered it in a thin haze. Various books lined the shelves, a tea set and small amenities all seemed more fit to entertain guests than host the lords and leaders of the nation's military power while they were on the brink of the next great war. It was spacious, huge even. Perhaps that was why it chose this room. Because spacious as it was, the tension between all was so thick it could be considered a physical presence in and of itself, and made the room feel small and claustrophobic. Kuta had to admit, he didn't think someone like A would have it in him to be so tactful. He also had to admit this was very, very good wine. A glowered over the room like a bear, displeased with intruders in its territory. Terumi flitted between conversations here and there with Sarutobi, Tsunade, even Orochimaru before talking easily with the Kazekage and Kitsuchi, the Tsuchikage. The Kazekage himself was a wary creature, trying to see where all the pieces would fall, trying to measure the odds of the best outcome for himself and his village if he held true to the alliance, or tried to stab them in the back. And old Hiruzen was his ever-so-patient self. The monkey in the tree, watching all the animals beneath him and finding all their weaknesses. All this, Kuta watched from his seat, taking their measure, as no doubt they were doing the same to him. It was Kitsuchi, the Tsuchikage, that Kuta could not read, his face a mask of iron and hard lines, and that was dangerous. Luckily, he didn't need to read him. Standing up, wine in hand, the daimyo of Hai no Kuni allowed himself to sway just a bit with the movement. "Reikage Dano," he called, smiling wide as those baleful eyes turned to him. With a slight bow, Kuta laughed. "I must truly compliment you on this excellent wine." Waving his hand to the others around the room, he called. "I would propose a toast. To the exams and dash, you must be insane dash." He was swiftly interrupted. "If you think I would ever share a drink with you." Kuta closed his eyes, taking a breath as he turned to face Haran Michizu, the daimyo of Tsuchi no Kuni. "Michizu." He laughed at him. "Don't drink if you like, but you truly are missing out on good wine." To emphasize his point, he took another swig of his own drink. "If you have a reason to be unhappy, wine makes it better." He laughed again. Beside the man, Kitsuchi's face was still a thing carved of stone, but Michizu's face grew red, infuriated as he stood up, apparently unable to contain his anger any further with Kuta's blatant gloating. "So angry?" Kuta goaded at the sight, smiling at the man. "There are so many reasons to be happy, Michizu." He grinned, eyes glimmering with a trace of something sinister even he couldn't fully hide. With a snarl, the daimyo of Tsuchi no Kuni turned to the Rai, Kaze, and Mizukage. "Do you see this arrogance? This blatant? How can you trust this man when he flaunts the fact that he betrayed the terms of a peace negotiation to carry out an assassination? This demands retribution. Even by you shinobi." So says the Lord who had an invasion force of these same shinobi you would now shame, ready to assassinate me during those same peace negotiations. And so the trap was sprung, and Kuta noticed the moment the man realized his mistake. The truth was, both sides looked equally guilty of treachery. What mattered most was who got their story out first, and how they spun it. His fellow daimyo moved to cut him off, and Kuta shouted over his protests. What say you to an invasion force of hundreds of shinobi at my border? Eh? The ones who pursued me for nearly 2 days. Of a Jinchuriki knocking on the doors of my very palace. And Michizu. Was that in good faith? Admit it. That was your sloppy attempt at my own life. He howled, allowing anger to shine through. There was a silence in the room, and Kuta dared not break his gaze from the opposing daimyo to measure the reactions of the others. Suddenly he laughed again, standing straight. Michizu, just admit that you're angry because after all these years of trying to kill me, I still live and drink to wash it all away. Ha! To emphasize his point again, he reached back and served himself more wine. He began to chug down the wine when Michizu finally found his voice again. We'll see how much you're laughing by the end of these exams, Magajiro. The man hissed, standing as Kuta kept chugging down the alcohol from his saucer, holding up a single finger asking his sober colleague to wait a moment, a request that went unheeded as Michizu kept right on shouting. And even after this is done, I swear we won't rest until I tear your palace down and bury you and I dash. Kitsuchi's hand snapped out, grasping his daimyo's arm, pulling the man back with a quiet stare. Michizu's face was a mask of fury that should have been a pale reflection to Kitsuchi's own. But the Tsuchikage merely stood up, as calm as a snowmelt stream as he clasped his hands together in front of him and offered a quick bow to everyone around the room. The trip has obviously been taxing on all of us. I believe it would be best if Michizu-sama and myself retired for the day. With another bow, not waiting for anyone's leave, Kitsuchi turned and escorted the flustered Michizu out of the room. Kuta watched them leave, finally allowing, for the briefest of moments, for the act to fall from his persona, dark eyes glinting like knives at their backs before the doors shut behind them. Finally, he caught the barest hint of what lay before him when looking at this young man who was now the Tsuchikage. And it reminded him of an old passage he'd read long ago. Make no deals. No pleas. No attempts at peace. Build no great work save for our respective tombs. For as long as we live, either of us will be defeated in this war. Then his mask was back in place, the smile slipping once again onto his features as he turned to the remaining leaders. This truly is very good wine. So, when did you meet Naruto-san? The question, of course, came from Tenten, who was still curious, and had chosen a seat directly across from Haku, Hinata at her side sitting across from Naruto. Oh! Haku raised her eyes skyward, thinking. This must have been, what? 6-7 years ago now? 7 going on 8. Naruto answered beside her. Right, well we both entered the Chunin exams that were being held in IWA. I was around 11 or 12 at the time and Naruto-san was around 6 I believe. Yup, and by the end of the exam we were so outnumbered by IWA and Kumo Ninja, that us, being the only teams of Konoha and Kiri, decided to team up to take them all down. Naruto smiled. How many enemy teams were there? Sakura asked, leaning a little forward, interested to hear about Naruto's own experience with the Chunin exams. Oh, maybe 5? 6? Naruto half stated, half shrugged, looking to Haku for confirmation. More or less. She smiled sheepishly. It's been so long I forget the number. I do know I had to rescue you. Hey! Naruto laughed, mockingly indignant. If I remember right, I took down almost 3 whole teams by myself. Doesn't change that you still needed rescuing, was the cheeky reply. You rescued him. What happened? Tenten was practically draped halfway across the table by now. On the other side of the table, Kurenai watched the conversations proceeding along with Guy. I didn't think your student Tenten was so interested in other people's love lives. Guy shrugged before whispering to his colleague. To be honest, I was starting to get a little worried about her. It's good to have passion for your work, but there must be other interests to hold your attentions. Kurenai stared at him. You are saying this? Guy blinked, apparently not understanding. You, the guy that runs around the village with his hands and has an insane training regiment that could make the Hokage go for a vacation, are saying that your student is too obsessed? I have hobbies. Guy protested. Name 2. Knitting and ceramics. Bullshit. In his seat, Naruto laughed, smiling as he listened to Haku regale Sakura, Hinata, and Tenten of her stories from both the Chunin exam and her training in Kiri, listening to Sasuke, Kiba, and Shino talking with Haku's surrogate team that she was escorting for the sickly Kimimaro, while Lee, at the far end of the table, played some paper games with Akane, all the while Niji sat still, waiting for the food. Soon enough, however, he felt it, a prickling at the back of his mind as his enhanced senses informed him of who was outside. For a moment, he was tempted to ignore it, to stay here and play dumb. But he didn't. He owed her that much at least. "I'll be right back, guys." He excused himself, pretending to head towards the restrooms before veering out to the exit. He stepped outside, greeted by a massive window that looked down on the low-hanging clouds that blanketed the lower peaks beneath them. The sun was setting, a blazing orange sky that lit the clouds below aflame seemed otherworldly. "Enjoying yourself?" He turned, eyes meeting the pink gaze of none other than Kuratsuchi. He returned her steely gaze with one of profound sorrow. "Kuro. I didn't know about any of this, either did attach dash, doesn't matter anymore, does it?" She interrupted, shrugging as she kept her arms crossed. "Whether you knew or not, whether you wanted this or not, it's done." "Of course it matters," he protested. "I'm your friend. You're still my friend, Kuratsuchi. We're on different sides of this, but that doesn't mean we have to do what they want us to do regarding each other." "That's where you're wrong," was her answer. And it made his heart sink. There was a silence between them. A pregnant thing, heavy with unspoken words, a dozen conversations taking place between their eyes before the moment was broken, Kuratsuchi turning her gaze towards the window, staring inside. "That your team then?" And like a sleeping beast roused from its torpor, that protective anger sparked itself to life inside of him, and Naruto's gaze hardened just a bit, becoming more steely with every passing second. "They are not involved in this." "No," she agreed. "They're not. But that doesn't matter either, does it?" And Naruto stood straighter, fists clenching. No one on earth, heaven or hell, would ever threaten his team again. "Kuratsuchi," he warned, "you're my friend, and I love you, like you're my own blood, but dash." He glared into her eyes. In that moment, even with his diminutive size, he seemed to tower over her. "If you dare to go after my friends, I'll crush ya." She stared at him, and for a moment he saw the flash of hurt behind the steel, the pain cutting through her before she pushed it aside, pressed it down, and looked at him with eyes that bled contempt. She turned and walked away without saying another word. Chapter 48. Kumogakure's exam, like most exams in villages, would start inside a building. Well, correction. Most exams would start in a building, but few buildings were built to surround the peak of a mountain, with windows the size of doors allowing you to look down to the clouds and mountains below. "Wow, guys! Look at this view!" A fact that Naruto was taking in with his own unique brand of enthusiasm. Face pressed up against the glass, smiling like a loon while two of his students tried not to be embarrassed at his antics. "Just ignore it," Sakura hissed to Sasuke. "Just ignore it and he'll go away. No one knows we're with him. No such luck. Guys, come look." His hand was suddenly at their collars, dragging them over to the viewing platform. "Naruto!" Sasuke barked. "Can you please focus?" The blonde blinked, then smiled. "Why? You guys are the ones taking the exams, not me." Their displeased frown spoke volumes. "You guys know I almost got killed taking one of these things more than once, even." Naruto smiled. "I hate you," Sasuke drawled, despising Naruto's snickering laughter. "You guys are gonna be fine," he finally insisted, smiling. The double doors opened, and in walked Akane, followed closely by Tsunade and Orochimaru. "Hi, guys!" The little girl waved, running over to them, the two Sannin following behind her at a more sedate pace. "Hey, girl." Sakura smiled, ruffling the mess of red hair when she got close. "You ready?" "Bouncing off the walls," Tsunade answered, smiling at the three genin before placing her hands on her hips. "This is where I leave you, I guess." She seemed to be fishing for words before she offered a "kick their asses" to finish off along with a thumbs up. "They will win," Orochimaru reassured, yellow eyes glinting as he turned them to Naruto with that serpentine grin. "Won't they?" The blonde ignored him as best he could, even as the other three gave their own forms of confirmation before all four moved to the double doors at the other side, where the teams were gathering. As soon as they made their way through, they realized that they were early, relatively speaking. There were a few teams here and there, Mostly Kumo, but the bulk of the genin from other villages hadn't arrived yet. Hell, none of the Konoha teams were here. Guess we wait. Sakura half-stated, half-asked. Naruto shrugged and moved to take a nearby chair. Soon enough, team by team, the others started to arrive. Guy's team was first, with Lee and Guy apparently having gotten into some kind of oath that involved them climbing up the side of the mountain after the exam without the use of their feet. No one on Team 7 deigned to ask. Nor did they question Tenten's desire to be rescued. Haku's team arrived before Hinata's, and either out of a desire for distance, or the belief that one kept to their own now that the exam was officially starting, they didn't come over, though Haku herself did offer Naruto a smile and a wave hello. As the genin were talking among themselves, Guy and Naruto were a little off to the side, with both of them filtering between various topics of conversation, one which tapered off a bit as the IWA genin marched in. IWA had brought 3 teams. Naruto recognized none, though Guy did point out one of the Jounin sensei as someone of some repute, to which the blonde quietly nodded and listened for tidbits of information if things went really sideways. Then the doors opened again. Naruto tossed a look, not expecting anything out of the ordinary, only to stiffen in surprise. He'd recognized that Suna team anywhere. Except for one of them. There was Temari and Kankuro. Their equipment was different. He didn't see the massive fan on Temari's back, or the bandaged karasu on Kankuro's. But it was Gaara. Gaara that made him pause. He recalled vividly the Gaara of his time. At this age. A palpable, barely restrained coil of rage ready to explode at any moment. A feeling of dread and danger that permanently suffocated the air around him as he glared at everyone with baleful green eyes that carried a look of pure loathing just beneath their teal-green surface. That was his Gaara right now. At this exam. This Gaara, however, was different. Dressed in white with accents of red, with the gourd missing from his back and a blindfold around his eyes, Naruto realized, instantly, that he couldn't detect his chakra signature. Nothing there that indicated a Jinchuriki was standing before him. Was the demon sealed in a different host? Then he peered closer. And it wasn't the chakra signature of a Jinchuriki he couldn't sense on Gaara. It was just that he couldn't sense any chakra at all. There were very few things that could do that. Off the top of his head, there. No. More than that. More than 1. 4. At least 4 heavy chakra suppressant seals were on his friend. He couldn't tell what medium they were using, not for sure though he could guess the blindfold was one, but he could feel the 4 of them. Like touching the wall of a dam. Solid, implacable, but you can always feel the water churning just beyond the granite. Naruto-san? Guy's voice snapped him out of it, and he smiled for a second. No worries, I just remembered something. Then, hopping off his chair, he made his way over to their teams, keeping his eyes on the Suna team and the Gaara he could barely recognize as Temari helped lead her blindfolded brother to the corner they'd chosen. Hey guys, he said with a smile as he came in close enough to the team. Huh! Oh hey Naruto-san, Tenten greeted with a slightly confused blink. Guys, see that Suna team? He gestured with a jerk of his head. The ones that just walked in? What about M? Sasuke asked, raising an eyebrow. Try to avoid fighting them if you can, he said. In fact, if you can, just avoid them altogether during the first part of the exam. Okay? Why? It was Niji that asked the question. Trust me, Naruto implored. Avoid fighting them unless myself, or Guy are nearby. The same goes for Hinata's team. Got it? His piece said. He didn't offer any more words of explanation. He marched back over to Guy, keeping an eye on the friend he barely recognized. Almost an hour later, when the teams were finally called away, Naruto, Guy and Kurenai each offered their own words of encouragement and last-minute advice before the genin were marched through a final set of doors. All right, the proctor, a dark-skinned Jounin, seemed to snarl at them. All teams pay attention because Whatever he was gonna say was interrupted by a loud voice that sounded distinctly like an Uzumaki filtered in through the door. You've gotta be kidding me. You too. That interruption was minuscule when compared to what happened immediately after. Someone broke down the door. To be specific, someone cut the door into what must have been 2 or 3 dozen pieces, and the next thing they saw was a woman, wielding 8 very sharp blades, tumbled right in, rolling end over end before face planting onto the floor. How she managed this without skewering herself on those blades, none of them would ever know. She was a massive woman, to say the very least. Even on the floor that was obvious. Dark-skinned like a lot of Kumonin, at least 6 feet of pure muscle, with arms that looked like they could snap a man's neck if she ever got him in her grip. She raised one of those arms now, finger held upward. Wait! My team is here! No need to fear! Only then did the others realize that, behind her, literally being tugged along by a rope tied to the woman's waist, were 3 other genin, all of them looking like they just lost a boxing match against the concrete floor. Sakura would forevermore be grateful that her particular blonde idiot sensei was just eccentric rather than fucking crazy. With her team safely deposited, if a little concussed, the woman known in Kumo as B marched out of the room with a triumphant swagger, only to walk, hip to face, into a little blonde boy, who stared up at her with a completely blank expression on his cherubic features. Hey! I know I'm gorgeous, but it's rude to stare, precious. She smiled. The kid kept staring at her for about 6 more seconds, just long enough for B to start to feel awkward when he suddenly shrugged. Okay, if I can deal with Inchan, I can deal with this one. Then he smiled, thrust out his hand and smiled, megawatt bright. Hey! I'm Naruto, wanna be friends? And throughout the village of Kumogakure, a collective shudder of dread was inexplicably felt by a majority of the population. B smiled, and was about to answer when her sharp gaze caught something on the other side of the room. Lowering her sunglasses just enough to peer clearly over their rims, a wicked smile graced her face. Why hello there, tall, pale and sexy. She seemed to snarl to herself. Confused, Naruto followed the direction of her stare. What is she dash? His gaze landed squarely on a mercifully oblivious Orochimaru on the other side of the room. Oh dear God, why? Chapter 49. Your examination will be a contest between teams, the proctor finally declared as soon as his colleagues finished putting up a large blue tarp to act as a door. It was necessary, seeing how B had thoroughly destroyed the previous one. The team matchups and partners will be chosen by random draw. He continued, eyes venturing down to his clipboard. 2 teams will be defending, 3 will be attacking. The defending teams will be guarding a client. How you do so is entirely up to you. Your strategies will be taken into account for your final score. If the attacking teams land what would be considered a killing blow on your client, that will also be taken into account. Attacking teams, your objective is infiltration, not mass destruction. Your effectiveness at the art of stealth will be the primary measure of your success. That's not fair! Someone shouted from one side of the room. Sasuke looked out of the corner of his eye, finding a Kumo Kunoichi, dark-skinned with red hair. If he recalled correctly, that was actually one of the students belonging to that woman with the 8 blades. The Konoha guys got a freaking Hyuga, she hissed. They can see through fucking walls. Tough. The proctor answered without even looking up from his clipboard. On a mission you don't get to complain about an unfair bloodline, you work around it, or you fail the mission. Rebuttal given, he continued addressing the rest of the assembled genin. The client will be a Chunin proctor, however, the proctor will do nothing to aid the defending team or hinder the attackers. Attacking teams, you are authorized to attempt lethal blows against the proctor to secure your objective if needed. That seems a little brutal. Sakura hissed beside him. Sasuke nodded in slight agreement. Even though a Chunin could in theory defend themselves far better than most genin could manage, mistakes could happen to anyone at any rank. Guess they just don't want the genin to hesitate, and then cry at an unfair loss or whatever. He theorized, offering a weak shrug in response. Personally, he hoped that they were on an attacking team. Defense had too much to worry about. Sure, they could rig traps and work a solid plan if they were smart, but with a 3-man advantage and no need to protect a client, the attackers seemed to have a solid edge in his opinion. It also played to his strengths in stealth. If they were on defense, Sakura is the one the team would have to rely on given her mind for trap making, and truth be told, his pride kinda chafed at that, stupid as it was. In fact, now that he thought about it, the one that would suit either role, attack or defense, was actually Akane. On attack her small size could be an advantage, and on defense, within the tight quarters of a building or some predetermined battleground, her fire attacks could be extremely useful in holding off multiple enemies at once. After all, it was the attackers that had to infiltrate and avoid destructive attacks. The proctor didn't say anything about that being a limitation for the defensive ninja. This is gonna eliminate a lot of the other teams, Akane observed just in front of them. She was right. Either the 3 attacking teams got eliminated or the 2 defenders. At the very least it would cut the teams down by 40%, and if most attackers failed, as high as 60%. Sucks to be them, Sasuke answered, tossing a smirk to the two girls who offered their own smiles in return. As the proctors began calling genin teams and the numbers started to get rolled out, the coil of anxious anticipation wound its way tighter and tighter in Sasuke's gut, even at this relatively mundane stage of the examination. He mentally chastised himself for it. He should be above simple butterflies. He wondered if Naruto, or hell, Itachi had ever been nervous for their exams. The first was a carefree idiot who always seemed ready with a devil-may-care grin and an easy laugh no matter what problem was in front of him. And the other was his sister, who was the youngest jounin in a generation. He shook his head to clear the benign, distracting thoughts, forcing himself to focus. It seemed like they were called at random. Guy's team, Tenten, Lee and the Hyuga were the first Konoha team to be called, a little later, Kurenai's team. By the time the proctor called them, he must have been halfway through his list by Sasuke's count. Sasuke stepped forward to march up to the proctor and take the number, but Sakura half beat him to it, tapping him twice on the shoulder as if to say wait here before she negotiated her way through the crowd, leaving him and Akane behind her. When she returned, she was wearing a strange sort of smile on her face. He wondered why, when of course she held up the orb with their number. It was a 7. Sasuke couldn't help it, he laughed. The laughter made others look at him funny, but Sakura joined in a second later, followed by Akane's little smirk as she finally caught sight of the ball and got the joke. More and more teams were called up, more and more people got their designated spot. From what he gathered, the way it was broken up was through intervals of 5. Teams 1, 2, and 3 were the attacking teams of the first group, 4 and 5 the defending teams, 6, 7, and 8 the attackers of the next group, with 9 and 10 defending, and so on and so forth. There were 43 teams here by his count. He guessed that the last group would be divided into 2 attackers and 1 defender or something. Tenten showed off her team's designated number 4 a little to his left, and he offered her a show of fingers for the 7. Kiba's team was a little too far to communicate for now. He tried to look at other teams around them to see if he could find any teams on their cluster, but no such luck. A 12, a 16, and a 5 were his rewards before he decided to give up. Besides, finding out early wouldn't change anything. Soon enough, the random draw was over. Teams 1 through 5, announce yourselves and step forward, the proctor called, pen and pad in hand. Team 3 here. Team 1. 4 over here. Sasuke tossed his eyes over to Guy's team, finding Tenten holding up the ball with the 4 clearly visible on it, feeling a frown on his face. They had an IWA team as an opponent. There was a risk of dying in every Chunin exam, but personally, he'd rather not increase that possibility by needing to fight an enemy that might have a vendetta. And those IWA guys looked like they had a vendetta. Even so, not his problem, and nothing they could dash. Team 5 here. Now he winced. The one holding up a clear 5 was another IWA team. He wasn't the only one to notice, judging by the silence that had settled over the room. All eyes were suddenly on the proctor, wondering if he was gonna break this up or order a random draw again. The man didn't even bat an eye, and just kept going with the process. Tenten, Lee and Niji were literally on their own. Teams 6 through 10 in order this time, he added at the end, apparently wanting to make his job easier. To Sasuke's immense surprise, Hinata's hand rose up, and Kiba obediently called out just a few feet away. Team 6 here. Sakura held up her hand. 7 here. Sasuke felt a smirk tugging at his lips. With another Konoha team, things were going to be much easier. Especially as an offensive team. Hinata's Byakugan was basically gonna win this thing on its own. Then again, if she'd been on defense, she'd have made things similarly difficult. You couldn't exactly sneak up on a Hyuga. Suppose he should count his blessings. Team 8 here. Sasuke turned, trying to crane his neck to look over the crowd and finding a team from Takigakure. The only team from Takigakure. Nominally, Taki wasn't an ally, but they weren't hostile either. They could work with this. Then, all that good fortune decided to come crashing down as he heard the next team. 9 here. Apparently, Naruto's little request that they stay away from that Suna team just got a hell of a lot harder. The Uchiha tossed a look across the room, where he saw the blonde Kunoichi with the 4 pigtails still gripping the ball with her team's number emblazoned across it in bright yellow. Yup. There was the 9. And it wasn't going anywhere. Well, shit. This was not Naruto's first Chunin exam. It was, however, the first Chunin exam he'd ever had to endure from the other side of the proverbial fence. The helpless anxiety was an entirely new an entirely detested feeling. He knew that Sasuke, Sakura and Akane were a hell of a lot more prepared for this exam than he, Sasuke and Sakura had ever been for the exam he took the first time around, and maybe even better prepared than Ryoko, Kyofu and he had been for the exam he took this time around. Those self-assurances, however, did very little to actually help him in any way. He wanted to see them, and make sure they'd be fine. Without him they were in danger. If he was there, nothing could happen to them. He wouldn't let it. But out here all he could do was wait. At least he had beat to take his mind off of things. So why 8 swords? He already knew the answer, of course, but he wanted to see what answer she'd give him regardless. Why don't you have 8 swords? She asked, frowning as she narrowed her eyes behind those glasses, an accusation in her tone. Because I don't know how to use them. Why didn't you learn? Somehow he felt like this had been turned back around on him. Practicality? Practical is boring, she dismissed. Practical keeps you alive. He shot back, then did a mental evaluation of the hypocrisy of that statement coming from him. He tried not to wince. I'm still breathing, she smiled, chuckling. Then she got a twinkle in her eye, leaning forward onto the table. All right, now I get to ask you a question. Is he single? The sound of Naruto's head thunking against the table was her answer. As soon as the teams were called and sorted, they were split up. They were each led to what seemed like a fairly large seal of some kind on the ground, told to stand still, to not fight, and seconds later, with a lurching in their stomachs that felt like a kawarimi, only much more abrupt, they were somewhere else. They arrived to another seal matrix at their feet, standing in the middle of the ruins of what must have been a tiny village or hamlet of some kind. Thick grass reached their knees, moss and vines grew over the wooden corpses of houses and barns. It was a rice farming village. You could still see the telltale remains of the rice paddy fields, all segmented plateaus and shallow pools. Sakura looked around, immediately recognizing the mountains that were the Kumogakure village proper, about a mile or so south of them. This will be the location where you will undergo your examination, their proctor said to them, adjusting his glasses for a moment before he continued. Numbers 9 and 10. You will have approximately 12 hours to fortify yourselves somewhere within these ruins in order to fight off the attacking teams. Attacking teams, you are not allowed to attack or spy on your opponents until the allotted time has passed. If you are caught doing so, you and your respective individual 3-man cell will be dismissed. Once the allotted time has passed, you may attack the defending teams at your leisure, though you will have a time limit of approximately 3 days to do so. If 3 days have passed, and you have not made the attempt to attack, all 3 attacking teams will the exam automatically. Successful defense or elimination of the client will be taken into account to determine the teams that pass, but this is not the sole factor. Strategic thinking, planning, adaptability, creativity, teamwork, stealth, and many other factors will affect our final decision. Teams that have succeeded in taking out the target have failed. Teams that have succeeded in defending the target have failed. Know that this is a stealth-based exam. Act accordingly. Just then another person made their way from where they'd been hiding behind a building. It was a kunoichi, older than them of course, chunin, hair tied into a bun. This is your client. She can protect herself of course from stray attacks, but if she deems anything to be a lethal blow a civilian would not have survived, she will declare it as such. Proctor. One of the Taki-nin raised his hand. We did not prepare for a multi-day assignment. What will we do for rations, or dash? That is part of the examination. The man said. If you've come prepared, good. If not, you may forage, or you may choose to scavenge for some hidden caches of food we've placed around the area. Be aware, however, that some have been poisoned. They won't kill you, but you will certainly be feeling their effects. It is likely you will be incapable of participating for the 3 days. The proctor seemed to stand a little straighter, his clipboard now pressed to his side rather than in his nose. You will each be under constant supervision by our examiners. Should you ever wish to forfeit, say so. But know that one man's forfeit is the forfeit of his 3-man cell. As though satisfied with his warnings and statements, the man straightened. Now. Numbers 6, 7, and 8. Walk half a mile directly south. Follow the red markers. Allow numbers 9 and 10 their 12 hours. Good luck to you all. And he was gone in a puff of smoke. Just like that. Sakura tossed a look to the Suna team, and there would be partners, a Kumo team. The 6 of them looked at each other, then back at them, with the 15 teenagers seemingly taking each other's measure before they, the defenders, plus client began marching into the village ruins, preparing themselves to set up the defenses, and she went with the others to allow them to have their 12 hours. The first thing they did was forage. As soon as they'd been out of sight of the defending team, Hinata and Sasuke had gotten to talking. Well, Sasuke had talked. Hinata had used hand signs, with both of them settling on a rapid-fire to-do list. And the consideration that they might want to wait nearly the full 3 days before attacking had come up instantly, and as such, the first thing they had to do was find food. The Takigakure team didn't really like the fact that Hinata and Sasuke were acting as the de facto leaders of this team, so it did take some cajoling, but ultimately, the brains of their team seemed to realize that they were outnumbered and the best way to win would be to go with the flow, seeing as how they ultimately needed to cooperate with each other to win this exam. Kiba and Shino, as it turns out, were worth their weight in gold here. When you had the nose of a dog, and a million insect feelers sending you back information as they crawled across the fields and forests, finding the hidden caches of food was child's play. From there, it was just a matter for all of them to help collect it. Even better was the fact that both of them could identify which ones were poisoned. All Kiba needed to do was smell them, and if he wasn't sure, Shino had some of his Kakachu eat the suspect rations. Bit by bit, as the clock ticked on, they piled the rations together, separating the poison bunch from the ones that were good enough to eat. If Sakura were any judge, she'd say they had more than enough food for all of them to last the 3 days. Even Kiba. And his appetite was nothing to sneeze at. Then, it was time to get down to the nitty-gritty of it all. Planning. They sat together in a loose circle. Shino had to translate for Hinata, apparently, since none of the Takini knew sign language, a fact that Sakura secretly balked at given that it had been standard training at the Konoha Academy for silent ops. But other than that minor inconvenience, things seemed to be going relatively smoothly. You want to wait? Why? Mostly anyway. Think about it. Sasuke insisted, dark eyes staring at the Takigenin across from him. We have more food than we know what to do with. We can last here fully stocked while they likely won't even start gathering food until they're done laying down their defenses and traps. And even then they'll always have to leave a group behind to protect the client, while the other team scrounges for food. Yes, but you don't have to wait the full 3 days. The Takigenin insisted. After they make their traps, forage for food, and remain on edge expecting an attack tonight, we can go in and try to take them out while they're physically exhausted from everything they had to scramble to do today. We'll not only have a 3-man advantage but be fully rested and ready to fight by then. The longer you wait, not only do you potentially lose the exhaustion, but give them more time to make more elaborate and thorough traps. By the time we decide to attack, we might just be sifting through an entire field of traps and we might never reach the client. You don't win a fight like this by letting your enemies dig in. Sakura did have to admit, he made a good point. No, you don't. Sasuke shot back, eyes narrowed in irritation. Apparently her teammate didn't like people questioning him too much. But neither do you win it going in guns blazing. I'm not saying we let them have 2.5 days of rest and leisure. I'm saying we wear them down bit by bit. You mean pick them off? No. I said wear them down. She could tell he was trying not to roll his eyes. Think about it. He insisted again. If you're on the defensive team, you need a lookout, and that lookout when he sees something is gonna raise an alarm. 1 or 2 of us can go in intermittently, have them wake up every few hours, which means none of them get sleep. Add to that Hinata being able to watch them as they try to forage food, we can ambush them through that, and if not beat them, at least corral them back into their little hole, starving them out. 2.5 days with little food and no sleep would do a hell of a lot more than just being a little tired at the end of the first day. Also a good point. Hinata tapped Shino on the shoulder, making a few quick signs. Hinata-san says that we can also use the opportunity to poison their collected food supply with our own poison rations. Why not burn it? Kiba asked, turning to her. They might have someone that can dash. Hinata made some more signs. Oh right. What did she say? Another of the Takigenin asked. Stealth. Kiba answered with a shrug. She's right. Lighting a big bonfire won't exactly be subtle. If we have the opportunity, we should do that. Sasuke nodded. But I doubt they'd be very far from that food store. I'd keep both the client and the food as close as possible in order to concentrate the defenses. But what you're doing is basically sabotaging our score. The Takinin that had been arguing with Sasuke insisted. The whole point of the exercise isn't to be seen, but you want them to keep seeing us every few hours so they wake up and raise an alarm. At that, Sasuke's lips pursed. Apparently he hadn't thought of that. Neither did she, truth be told. Still, Sasuke was nothing if not stubborn. The value in actually killing the target, or the complete elimination of the enemy genin, very likely outweighs the stealth score. You can't know that. Neither can you. Was his easy counter. They seemed to be at an impasse. A tense silence lay between the two of them until Sasuke finally sighed. Let's just settle this. We're hardly going to fight to the death, so let's just put this up to a vote. Yeah. The Takinin scoffed. Because that's totally not weighed in your favor. Sasuke smirked, and Sakura almost wanted to punch him for being a smug idiot when they really needed to keep these guys on their good side. Unless you see some other way of settling this, this is how it's gonna go. He didn't. All in favor of waiting. Sasuke raised his hand, along with Hinata, Shino, and herself. Surprisingly, so did a Takinin. His teammate looked at him, incredulous. He shrugged. Sorry, man, he said. I like his idea more. Sasuke looked around. 5 votes. Kiba wasn't surprising, but Akane's opinion was. Regardless, it wasn't enough to change the result he'd clearly been hoping for. All right, he drawled. Then it's settled. Chapter 50. One could describe Uchiha Sasuke's execution of his plan as insidious. Really, it was the first time, in her own mind at least, that Hinata admitted to herself that she would hate to have him as an enemy. It was one thing to say let's sneak in every few hours to wake them up and leave it at that. It was quite another to do so in increasingly creative ways that would blur the line between healthy fear and paranoia for most people. The first time, yes, it was that simple. Sasuke had volunteered to get in close with one of their teammates from Taki, pulling back once they knew they'd been spotted by the lookout and the enemy team was on full alert. And immediately after that, Sasuke had decided that was too ineffective. Went in a second time, planted smoke bombs with seals before he allowed himself to be seen. After that it had been Kiba's turn. And rather than repeat Sasuke's previous act in the middle of the night, Sasuke had set off a few of those smoke bombs he'd left before, and told Kiba and Sakura, his partner, to give the enemy team a wide berth and instead set Akamaru to howling to the moon. The fact that Kiba could join in right alongside his dog was an added bonus. It genuinely sounded like a pack of wolves once they got a little bit of practice in. After that, in the morning, Sasuke had asked Shino if he could use his Kikaichu to annoy and harass them rather than eat their chakra. It certainly wasn't the ideal usage. There's a reason Kikaichu needed a living host after all, but Shino had seen the merit of it, and so had decided to do so, sending off the insects to do their work. After that it wasn't uncommon to see the lookouts angrily swatting at bugs. Then, the Taki ninja and Akane were in line for their turn. Akane and her partner had made themselves obvious in their approach, standing on a small hill that overlooked the ruined village. They were spotted, of course, the lookout calling the others on the team while the other 2 Takinin scouted the place, marking the locations of traps and trying to map out the best approach. And every few hours Hinata would activate her Byakugan and watch what was happening. By the very first morning, she could see the effect it was having on them. The slumped shoulders, the bloodshot eyes, the weariness and irritability, even as the 2 teams kept their discipline and went about the jobs they knew they had to do. Foraging, patrol, trap making and guard duty. All but one of them anyway. The red-headed one. If her lip reading was accurate, and it was, his name was Gaara. His teammates were his sister and brother, Kankuro and Temari. While the others cycled through their duties, Gaara only ever seemed to have one job. Stick by the client. He wore a blindfold, but she doubted that was some kind of impediment. The team dynamic was also something to make note of. While both Kankuro and Temari assured their Kumonin partners that Gaara could guard the client by himself, Gaara took direction from Temari. That told her that both his teammates thought Gaara was the strongest one of the group, but his sister had taken the leadership role. Very curious. Her observations of the kunoichi didn't reveal anything special. She was competent enough to be sure, but she did not have an exceptional mind like Shikamaru or anything that stood out other than her hair. But judging by their words, and more importantly, body language, Gaara was more than willing to defer to her, and she had a reluctance to order him around. Well, there was an obvious way to exploit this. Most people would not associate the wicked little smile with the face of Hyuga Hinata. Miles away, Uzumaki Naruto came to the rather firm decision that he hated Chunin exams. He would never ever do one of these things again. 3 days. Why the hell did the team have an exam for 3 days? The hell was he supposed to do for 3 days without his team? B was gone now, called away on something or other, and Naruto tried to not think about how predatory she looked when walking out of here. Mind no doubt on you. He thought the exam would take a few hours, sure, maybe a day or so. But 3, while having no idea how much or how little danger/trouble his team was in, this was a special kind of torture for him. He wasn't sure where Guy and Kurenai were. Tsunade and Orochimaru had long since left, no doubt acting as either political statements, intimidation pieces, or negotiators for Sarajiji, and of course Gigi was busy. He didn't know what to do. With no distractions, no people around him to take his mind off of things, all Naruto had was his own thoughts. And those were bad company. He didn't go back to the hotel. Didn't even go to get something to eat. What he did was pace up and down the room, over and over again, and it was only as the sun was beginning to set that someone came and kicked him out, forcing him to leave and take his relentless walk out into the rounded mezzanine walkways of the village itself. The views were still gorgeous, a bright, burning orange across the sky with hues of blue and purple beginning to crest the upper reaches of the vista, while the clouds burned red and the snow-capped peaks glimmered like sheets of spun gold thrown over jagged spears. And he couldn't appreciate any of it. Chunin exams were dangerous things, and the thought that he could lose his team all over again made him sick to his stomach. Didn't think I'd ever find anything to put a frown like that on your face, Naruto-kun. The voice brought his eyes up, and the sight made him smile a little bit. Turning his eyes to Haku as she walked over to join him, taking in the view. Just worried about my team, he admitted. You're very close to them, aren't you? He bowed his head the slightest bit, a lifetime of memories that never happened in this world passing through his mind. Yeah. Probably more than I should be. He offered a laugh. Always been close with my friends. That's a good thing, she said, leaning on the railing beside him. Most days. He stayed quiet. She had more to say, and he had a pretty good idea as to what. You know that. She paused, seeming to measure her words. Kiri hasn't officially taken a stance or declared itself an ally of Dash. It doesn't matter. He interrupted, smiling as he gazed out to the mountain range. She looked at him, frowning. It does, if the negotiations. You and I could end up as enemies, Naruto. The blonde shook his head. Kiri might declare for IWA, or Kumo. The wars might make us fight on opposite sides, but that doesn't mean we have to fight. It doesn't mean we have to be enemies. It's not that simple. She protested. If they order me to. She paused, and he could see her composing herself, gathering that steel in her spine to say what she wanted to say. If they order me to kill you, I'll have no choice. I will do it, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled, the echoes of a past that never happened returning to his mind. Liar, he said. Then turned, looking at her over his shoulder. You don't want to. And I don't want to. So we won't. It's that simple. He insisted. She shook her head, sighing. You're impossible. His smile widened. I try. Soon enough the first day passed, then the second. All the while Sasuke and the others stuck to their plan. They harassed, irritated, and stalked the enemy teams relentlessly, never allowing them a moment's peace. As an added unforeseen bonus, Shino was able to map out the layout of a good portion of their traps, using the Kikaichu to search the fields for anomalies. He found tripwires, charged explosives, pits, and a slew of other deadly contraptions and their triggers. Those he could disarm with the bugs he disarmed, those he couldn't he marked on a map. And Hinata watched. She watched the enemy teams as their energy levels fell, as their chakra control took a sharp nosedive, as their heads started drooping, their patrols became sloppier and sloppier, their decision-making more and more sluggish. The only exception was Gaara. The blindfolded redhead continued to sit calmly, the flow of his chakra indicating that he was wide awake. He was awake when she slept, and he was awake when she woke up. Nothing changed to ever reflect that he was in any kind of distress. Not like the others. She didn't know what kind of training he'd gone through, but whatever it was paying off. 3 days and the guy didn't look like he had a hair out of place. That worried her. Even so, as strong as he was just a genin, and the rest of his team looked just about ready to keel over. Now or never. With a small flare of chakra to the back of her hand, where Shino's Kikaichu was, Hinata smiled as she heard her teammate call the others to gather. They'd been following Sasuke's lead so far. Now it was her turn to boss people around. It's gonna happen soon. Temari's head snapped back up, half because her head had fallen forward, half because of Kankuro's voice. They were sitting inside one of the few remaining huts in the village that was in semi-serviceable condition. There was a rather large hole in the roof of what had once been the kitchen, but 4 walls of bamboo and wicker served their needs well enough. It hadn't rained in the 3 days, thank God, but it had one entrance, and between the walls, lookouts, traps, and a few well-placed backpacks they had enough protection to make the enemy teams work for the kill. Even if they were too tired to actually put up a good fight. She wanted to feel angry about that, but she just couldn't care. Right now, she just wanted to get this over with. She wanted a table full of food, a hot shower and a bug-free hotel and a bed. Good God, if anything got between her and her bed once this was done, that thing was gonna be killed. Horribly. How are you feeling? That was Gaara's voice, and Temari allowed herself a moment to look at her blindfolded brother as he sat in the corner, trying not to feel jealous at how completely and utterly unruffled he looked compared to the lot of them. Even the client sitting beside him looked completely and utterly miserable. Like shit, she answered flatly, her expression shifting into an angry glare after a second. This waiting thing of yours fucking sucks. He had the nerve to smile, though she noted there was some apology to be seen in there. It'll be over soon enough. Besides, it gave Kankuro time to put his trap-making skills to work. Like I care about this idiot's trap-making skills. That's hurtful, sis. Bite me, she answered, tossing a look outside between the thin strips of straw, eyeing one of their Kumogakure teammates on watch. She could admit, they were at least taking the no-sleep thing well. Better than she'd feared, at least. They could still stand straight. She let her head fall back, leaning against the wall, trying not to let herself fall asleep as she looked at Gaara through half-lidded eyes. What do you think, Dash? A whistle, no, a series of whistles, 5 quick, sharp tones from the south. She got to her feet, trying not to sway as her vision swam with the sudden movement, while her hands reached for her fan, Kankuro doing the same with Karasu. Good luck, their client said as Gaara smirked where he remained sitting beside the woman, somehow making his eyes look gleeful behind that blindfold. Smug bastard. She had to resist the urge to flip him off as she marched out the door. She noticed 2 of the Kumo-nin already moving to the south side of the perimeter, weapons drawn. She wondered where the third one was, but he was probably in hiding, or keeping an eye to the north or some other side in order to make sure they weren't flanked. At least she hoped so. Right now she didn't have the energy to go hold his hand and make sure he was doing his job. As soon as she walked out of the hut, the light of the sun hit her in the face like a sledgehammer, and she just wanted to go back into the hut and call out a forfeit. It was through sheer force of stubborn will and an utter sense of fuck these leaf mean that she soldiered on. One eye squeezed shut, and another squinting so hard it may as well be closed, she made her way around the hut to the south side, where she found 7 of the enemy genin. 8 if you counted the dog. Definitely flanking somewhere. Finally decided to make your move, huh? One of the Kumo guys taunted. She didn't care enough to know his name. Had to enjoy the scenery, the guy with the dog shouted back. Temari had to groan. Before this thing could devolve into some juvenile pissing contest, she decided to intervene. Let's just do this already, she huffed. I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm irritated, and I just want to leave. By my count, you guys have 2 hours left, so get the hell on with it. If you insist. The leaf nin, the one with the dark hair and dark eyes, was the one that spoke, a second before he started marching forward. Temari felt her eyebrow rise just a bit. Was he seriously stupid enough to walk onto their trap field? The incredulity gave way to a mild shock when he picked up speed and started actually walking through their trap field, without setting a single one off. The other 5 followed, and Temari had a moment to hear Kankuro curse before all hell broke loose. This was bad. This was really, really bad. The second the fight had started, Kankuro could tell this wasn't gonna go well at all. It wasn't just the lack of sleep, or the lack of food, or even the bone-deep weariness of 3 days of misery. No, it was the fact that his chakra was being leached out of him. He could feel it. Like a syringe sucking the blood out of a vein, Kankuro knew that something was terribly wrong. Worse was when he tried to use Karasu. Puppeteering didn't require a lot of chakra, so he had enough to spare, but when you needed 5 times the usual chakra requirement to even keep a stable connection to the puppet, you couldn't help but notice that something was horribly, horribly wrong. His enemies were the pink-haired Scarface and the red-headed Twerp. As of now, he was able to keep them at bay by maneuvering around his own traps, trying to get them to trip one while using the equivalent of sheer brute force to make Karasu run interference. How they managed to map out his trap layout was something he was gonna look into later. For now, though, with a twist of his fingers, tugging on chakra strings, he forcefully triggered one of his traps, the snap of rope, and what a precursor to the spikes that shot out of the ground right in front of the little brat. Unfortunately, she was just a hair too short to get run through. "Whoa!" she shouted, reeling a moment before she fell flat on her ass, the wooden bamboo spears now jutting out of the ground. Kankuro managed a single kunai toss before the pink-haired one was on top of him. Her taijutsu strength was nothing special, but she was fast, and Kankuro had never been particularly devoted to the art. He managed to block a high kick for rapid-fire punches before he tried to counter, and was rewarded with her knee in his ribs. With another twitch of his fingers, another trap was sprung, this time with a net shooting out from a launcher slightly behind him. One of the weights grazed his shoulder, throwing the momentum of the projectile off trajectory. That, coupled with Pinky lunging to the side, only saw her legs getting tangled up in the material instead of her whole body. He'd take it and call it a win. She hit the ground with a string of curses, gravel and dirt scratching up her arms as she slid. Kankuro took the opportunity for all it was worth and pounced. Kunai blades in hand, the puppeteer could see the startled fear in her eyes when suddenly, in a whisper of smoke, she was gone, replaced by the little kid who wasn't caught in the net. The pipsqueak cocked back her fist as gravity took hold, and he started to fall towards her. Now, as stated before, Kankuro was no real devotee to the art of taijutsu, but even he was fairly confident of his ability to tank the full power of a 7-year-old's fist. So he was immensely surprised when, with a roar of anger that sounded more like a squeal, she punched him dead in the sternum with enough force to break the hinge his puppet was hiding behind and break Karasu's sternum along with it. Though it offered a moment's resistance before caving in with a teeth-grinding crack of wood and groaning steel. What the fuck? Kankuro and Karasu both flew backwards, with the puppeteer tumbling end over end where he was hidden inside the bandages on the puppet's back before he finally fell out completely to hit the dirt with a pained groan, his puppet tumbling head over heels before carving a muddy trench through what had once been a rice field. Picking himself up, the middle Sabaka's sibling had enough mind to see the little girl's astonished face as she looked at her own fist. Then someone touched the back of his neck, at the juncture where his spine met the brainstem. And he, ironically, dropped like a puppet with his strings cut. His heart pounded in his chest, a rapid fear taking over his mind as he found he couldn't move, couldn't even speak, only gasped clicking breaths. Someone stepped in front of him, and Kankuro saw the Hyuga girl offering a little smile and a wave of her fingers before she stepped past him. Temari was not happy. She noticed straight away that everyone here was outnumbered 2-1, except for her. That was a strange thing to be angry about, but she was. Hell, one of the Kumo guys was outnumbered 3-1 if you counted the goddamn dog. And all she had was tall, pale, and broody to deal with. The guy seemed fast, sure, and he was doing a damn good job of both avoiding her attacks and deftly avoiding all of Kankuro's traps with what seemed like absurd ease, but she was straight up exhausted with something draining her chakra. He should have already kicked her ass. He was smart though, smart enough to know he had to close the distance. Worse than that, he was fast enough to do it too. Trying to catch him off guard, on his next rush Temari decided to meet him, charging forward with all the speed she could pull out of her tired body. She was rewarded with a mild surprise before his arms came up, blocking the iron fan with both elbows as he dug in his feet, sticking to the ground and using the moment to grip onto the fan, wrapping one arm around it before he sent out a kick to her side. Keeping the rest of the fan between them, she blocked the kick, trying to follow up with one of her own before his fist grazed the side of her eye, nearly clipping her face with a quick, follow-up elbow that looked like it had enough force behind it to crack her skull. Using her longer legs to get some distance and kick him in the gut, she yanked the fan out of his grasp and pulled away, tossing a kunai that hit him dead in the chest, only for his body to vanish in a cloud of smoke. Too slow. The impact of something, a kick or a punch she couldn't tell, into her kidneys almost made her want to throw up, the pain lancing up and down her back and around her torso as she fell forward, barely keeping enough presence of mind to roll with the fall to try and spring back to her feet. And he was in front of her again. Grabbing her by the head, Temari got 2 quick knees to her stomach before she let go of her fan entirely and blocked the next attacks with her arms. Then she thrust her hands forward and up the heels of her palms, smacking against the Leaf Ninja's chin. She felt, more than heard, the clack of teeth snapping together against her fingertips as he reeled. She grabbed her fan, looking up in time to see him spit out a glob of red blood to his right as his left hand tossed a barrage of shuriken at the same time. She opened up her fan, a single swing knocking the weapons away, only for him to close the distance again in that split second of blindness. Was she so tired that she'd seriously forgotten to add a gust of wind to the swing? Yes. Yes, she was. Even so, she adapted, her body moving as the Leaf Nin's fist shot forward. Ducking to the side, she raised her foot into a perfect front heel kick, her leg rising up to a near-perfect split as her heel caught the underside of his chin, physically knocking him off his feet and into the air. She couldn't help but smile in triumph. Then, there was an impact on her fan, something knocking it out of her hands and throwing her off balance. She only just had time to see her victim vanish in another puff of smoke before something else hit her in the face, and her vision went dark. Still too slow, Sasuke looked at the blonde kunoichi laying at his feet, tongue still throbbing from when she made him bite it with that hit. He grazed his teeth over the raw spot and felt it pulse with pain. Something to be dealt with later. The Kumo ninja were still fighting, but he could already tell they were gonna be overwhelmed soon. And looks like Hinata had taken care of that straggler and gotten to Sakura and Akane. Time to deal with the actual problem, as Hinata put it. Suna! He shouted into the hut. Got your sister out here. You gonna come out and fight me, or should I kill her and walk in? There was no movement. Not even a sound from inside the home. Come on now. I haven't got all day. Still no answer, no movement. He drew a kunai. You got until the count of 5, 1 dash. The redhead stepped out the door. It was a slow walk, if it wasn't because the guy had a blindfold one could almost call it leisurely, as it was Sasuke wasn't sure if it was a deliberate thing or if he was just trying to make sure he didn't trip and fall on his face. He stepped forward into the sun, white clothes catching in the wind as he moved his head this way and that way, apparently trying to locate all the sources of sound. I suggest you let her go, he finally said, looking straight at him. Give up the client. He shot back. The Suna Genin, to Sasuke's confusion, smirked. And then to his utter befuddlement, his answer was cheerful. Sure. Turning around and stepping back inside, it was only 6 seconds later that he came back out, woman in hand. I hereby surrender her to you, Gaara said, pushing her gently forward. Sasuke's lip curled, tossing a kunai that hit the woman dead in the chest. Her skin, unsurprisingly cracked, a porcelain doll of sand that crumpled after a moment. Think I'm stupid? Give us the actual client, he snarled. Oh, I'm afraid that's quite impossible. The redhead smiled. I haven't seen her in, 3 days or so, I'm afraid. No idea where she is. His confusion was apparent, and he tossed a look to Sakura and the others to see that they too were confused. You see, the redhead continued. In the original offered 12 hours of prep time the instructors gave us, I took the liberty of smuggling our so-called client back to the village. His smile widened. Sorry we didn't announce it. But you and your collective teams lost this exam 3 days ago. Chapter 51. You're lying! Sasuke snapped, the sneer that suddenly curled his lip turning his expression ugly. I'm not. The blindfolded redhead shrugged. Now, I'd rather not fight you, so dash. Sasuke didn't give him a chance to finish, throwing the kunai in his hand down with all the force he could muster straight towards the unconscious Suna Kunoichi. It would have cut the bridge of her nose, maybe her cheek just under her eye as well. Close enough to scare and scar. But he did not, despite his bravado, actually want to kill her. The point was made moot, however, as with a lurching at his feet, sand exploded around her, rising up from the ground like a million serpents, batting the blade aside before wrapping her from neck to feet and dragging her to Gaara's side before any of them could do more than blink in surprise. You must have misunderstood. Gaara spoke, voice like gravel and now deadly serious. I said I did not want to fight you. That does not imply an inability, or fear of doing so. He straightened, hands coming to his side as he clenched his fists. You lost. I suggest you accept it before I make you accept it. Sasuke felt his lip curl again. The redhead was angry, but outside of that, Sasuke could feel no real fear in him, no real worry. This wasn't empty bravado. Gaara was supremely confident that if they fought, he would win. Naruto's old warning tickled the back of his mind, telling them all to stay away from this Suna team, before anything else could be said or done, or any further plans could be acted on. 5 Chunin suddenly appeared through the field. This phase of the exam is over, one of them shouted. Teams, line up for our decisions. Wait. You're serious? Kiba balked. He actually smuggled their client out of here. That's not fair. The Inuzuka howled, teeth bared as he all but snarled at the nearest proctor. The whole point of this thing was to dash. Hinata made a hand gesture, mouth opening to let out an exhale that approximated sound. It spoke volumes of the Hyuga's control over her teammates that Kiba shut his mouth instantly. His fury was there, and readily apparent, but he was able to keep his mouth shut with an almost literal snap of her fingers. To be perfectly honest, Sasuke was not really much better than Kiba, despite his composure. His fists were shaking, trembling with the furious rage that was building moment by moment at the redhead Sabaku and these proctors who were allowing this to happen. That's cheating. He heard Akane hiss out a whisper to Sakura even as the Taki teammates beside them were all beginning to argue with the proctor closest to them. It took a while, especially with getting the Suna Kunoichi back to consciousness. He hadn't pulled his punch and he was glad of it. Hell, he should have hit her harder, but eventually all the team members of all the teams, including the Kumo Nin Shino and Hinata had taken out, were brought together to stand in front of the hut, the defense teams and the attack teams almost shooting lightning bolts at each other through their eyes. Even as Gaara looked like the cat that ate the canary. The proctors talked amongst themselves for a time, apparently comparing their notes, and coming to an agreement before one of the men stepped forward, clearing his throat. Teams, note that you require a final, bare minimum score of 15 out of 20 points to pass this phase of the exam. Successful defense or elimination of the client would net the defenders and attackers, respectively, 9 points. Holy crap! Sasuke heard Sakura hiss. That's more than half the score. Akane slapped him across the thigh as she said this, biting at her lip, as angry as any of them were to miss out on that many points. The others around them were sharing similar sentiments as Sasuke tried to ignore the series of high fives and celebrations taking place between the defense teams. The defending teams have successfully defended their client. Ergo, all defending team members will start with a default score of 9. The proctor paused, flipping through pages on his clipboard, his colleagues watching and waiting a few paces behind him. Team 6 of Konohagakure, please step forward. Hinata, Kiba and Shino each looked at each other and then to the members of Team 7 before they stepped forward, with Shino offering a bow. Yes, sir? Hyuga Hinata, the man said, beckoning her closer. She stepped towards him and the man cleared his throat. Your initial role in the exam was one of passivity. You did not assist overmuch in the first portion of the examination, nor did you use your bloodline to catch the enemy's movements. A deduction of 2 points. However, after the initial phase was done, you helped plan and carry out the attack phase of your strategy. For that, you were granted 4 points. Assigning people specific roles and designating targets you felt would be best countered by certain members of your team based on your observations. 7 points were granted. Furthermore, in the execution of your plan, you identified the opportune moment to attack and where to attack from, eliminating one of the enemy team members outright without a fight. 6 points. Your physical capabilities are largely still in question due to the lack of combat you engaged in. We do believe that your tactical acuity merits your passing this portion of the exam. Congratulations. The Hyuga girl visibly sagged with relief, a sigh escaping her before she bowed respectfully at the waist. Shino Aburame. Hinata stepped back, Shino stepped forward. For assisting in the swift and effective identification of poisoned as well as edible rations that were left by the examiners, we have awarded 2 points. For utilizing your insects to harass and effectively spy on the enemy movements from a safe distance, we have awarded 3 points. For attempting to utilize your insects to transfer poisoned rations onto edible ones to further cripple the team, we are awarding 2 points. Your patience and skill in positioning your insects, and not utilizing their chakra-consuming nature until the opportune moment we are aware requires significant control over your hive. 4 points. The proctor's face took on a slightly more somber look, and Sasuke could tell what his next words were going to be before he ever said them. However, whilst you did effectively support your teammates, you did not show enough combat skills to award you further points, and were too comfortable to stay within the parameters of a plan set for you by others for us to judge individual thinking for further merit. Whilst it is my personal belief that you have the discipline and skill to merit you passing the exam, the final score is clear. 12 points. Shino's face never changed, his expression, half hidden behind his cowl, didn't even seem to do much more than twitch as he bowed his head and a little at the waist, hand and fist coming together. I understand, thank you, sir. The proctor nodded, looking genuinely apologetic. Inuzuka Kiba. The last member of Team 6 gulped almost audibly, visibly sweating as he took a step forward like a man walking death row. For swift and effective identification of poisonous and edible rations, 3 points were awarded. For effectively determining the perimeter of the area the enemy teams had scouted via scent markings, 3 points were awarded. For harassing the enemy teams at night, as instructed, 2 points have been awarded. Your taijutsu was seen and measured to be slightly above average for a genin in your age group. 5 points. Your total is 12 points. Kiba was a lot less composed than Shino, cursing under his breath with a sharp fuck before he turned and marched away from the man. Shino and Hinata offered another bow before stepping back. Team 2, Sunagakure, please step forward. The 3 siblings marched in front of the Kumo Nin, practically radiating smug satisfaction. Even the Kunoichi, whose jaw was already starting to bruise. I was right. Sasuke thought bitterly. I should have hit her much harder. For the sake of expediency. The proctor stated. All 3 of you passed this examination. However, Sabaku no Kenkuro, you would have failed without the 9 points awarded to you by successfully defending the client. The puppeteer winced. What? The proctor nodded. While your trap-making skills were admirable, you failed to adapt once the layout of your defenses had been compromised. While manually triggering your traps to throw off your enemy was a valid tactic, it was, however, an exceedingly short-term one that could have just as easily harmed your teammates as much as your opponents. Furthermore, your taijutsu was rudimentary at best. She hit me like a rampaging brother. Gaara drawled. Quiet now. The Sunanin shut his mouth, though he still grumbled under his breath. Your lack of adaptability to the compromised traps, your below-average taijutsu, and your lack of environmental awareness to notice Hyuga Hinata as she approached behind deducted enough points so that you would have been left with a score of 13 without the 9-point advantage. Take note of these and improve. With the clear dismissal, Kankuro offered a half-hearted bow that he very clearly didn't mean before the Suna team returned to their place. The proctor called the Taki team next. 2 of them passed, if only just. Sasuke had the sneaking suspicion that, being the only Taki team in the exams, they'd decided to give an extra point or 2 to one of them. The Kumo team on the defense side was next. 1 of them failed, even with the 9-point advantage. When he asked why, the proctor's reply was deadpan as he described exactly what he was doing when the attack began, and why Hinata and Shino had neutralized him so quickly. You were asleep. When Naruto woke up that morning, he felt, for the first time in a long while, as though he could breathe again. His team would be back today. Noon was the time limit for the examination. He wasn't sure why it had taken them this long. Haku's team had shown up after just 1 day. So had others. All the Konoha teams, however, seemed to be held up. It would have worried him more. But just the knowledge that today was the last day, hell, the last few hours he would have to wait, was enough to put his mind at ease, at least a little bit. Even so, he still found himself impatient. For the first hour of his morning, before doing anything else, he spread out his senses, the nature chakra that still ran through his body in tiny amounts, allowing him to sense every life in the village for a moment before he tuned it out, filtering the information lest his mind and senses be overwhelmed by white noise. He could feel out all of his friends, all those familiar signatures that were so important to him. Tsunade, Sarutobi, Guy, Kurenai, Kirby, Haku, and on the list went. If he focused enough, his eyes snapped open, mouth opening in clear surprise before he scrambled off his bed, got dressed, and hauled out of his hotel room. As he blitzed through the high-rise village buildings, he all but bull rushed past people, dodging and weaving through the crowds to more than a few surprised and angry shouts tossed at his back. He arrived at a ramen stand. Breathlessly, Naruto stepped into the restaurant, peeling back the tarps that hung over the entrance. I was wondering when you'd notice my arrival, Naruto. Itachi's voice brought a wide megawatt bright smile to his face. She offered him a look over her shoulder, a small, barely there smile that showed him just how happy she was to see him considering her infamously stoic nature. When did you? What are you doing here? He finally managed, bounding up to an empty stool next to her and climbing onto it. We'll talk about that later, she said, returning to her ramen. Shrimp, he noted. How are the exams going? She was avoiding the question. She never avoided the question. That meant the answer was somewhere between really bad and horrifying. Even with that thought in mind, however, he trusted her. She would tell him when she wanted to. So he answered her. Not sure. They're on a 3-day phase. They'll be back in. He looked at a nearby wall clock. An hour, maybe less? She finished off the broth, taking the last shrimp and noodles off the bowl before leaving a bill to pay and standing. Come on then. It wouldn't do for them to return and not find anyone waiting, would it? Naruto frowned just a bit. Why don't you want to tell me why you're here? I do, she rebutted as she picked up her coat. Just not immediately. There will be time for it shortly. That, and I'd rather not have to repeat myself twice. He blinked, wondering what exactly she meant but deciding to simply do as she said for now. She always had a good reason for doing what she did. Leading her through the mezzanine buildings of Kumo, he pointed to all the places he'd eaten at so far, and to a few of the Kumo villagers he'd met in his relatively short time here. She listened, or pretended to at least. As they began to approach the place where the Chunin exam waiting area was, Naruto tossed her a look, craning his neck to look at her placid profile. I was worried about you, he admitted quietly. She was listening, stopping her walk as she turned to look at him. She didn't smile, but he did see her eyes soften a bit. I know. You shouldn't. I asked you not to? And you'll have to ask it every time, he answered, his smile turning a bit melancholic. I missed you too. It was weird, especially the first week. Being in the apartment without seeing you. This time, she did smile a bit. It was also strange not having ramen made at noon sharp without fail. And yet here you are cheating on my delicious ramen with some Kumo vendor. He narrowed his eyes in mock anger. I see how it is. He couldn't keep a straight face. Soon enough his bottled-up laughter hissed out through his teeth before he was chortling in the middle of the hallway. He settled down and looked back up at her. Well, no matter how bad the news is, I'm glad you're back in Chan. You told me you were going to try and stop calling me that. I'll start next time. He swore with a cheeky smile. She shook her head. Soon enough, they were in the waiting area where a handful of other jounin were already milling about. He spotted Guy with Kurenai before they saw him. Guy. Kurenai. The two jounin turned at the sound of his voice, blinking in relative surprise at the sight of Itachi beside him. Naruto-san. Kurenai began before looking at Itachi. You are Fugaku's eldest daughter, Sasuke-san's sister. I'm sorry Uchiha Itachi. She answered in a neutral tone. Pleasure. I did not know your father would be joining us so soon, Itachi-san. Guy said, arms crossed, though it didn't seem that he meant anything by his words or stance. He's not, she answered. I'm here on my own prerogative. Both for my brother and to carry a message to Sarutobi-sama. I see. Guy nodded before smiling. Well, you're more than welcome to join us as we wait. The teams will not be much longer, I'm sure. I heard that you're quite the accomplished genjutsu user. Kurenai stated, trying to strike up a conversation. Again, Itachi allowed herself a rare smile, and Naruto had to wonder if she wasn't actively ensnaring the two in a genjutsu or a few dozen of them just to amuse herself while she waited. Been known to dabble in it. Naruto snorted behind her. Understatement of the damn century right there. As the two kunoichi began to speak, sharing tips and observations of what was most effective, Guy and Naruto sat and waited. It was odd for the two most boisterous men of Konoha to be so quiet, while the resident Ice Queen and the infamously taciturn Uchiha were the ones striking up conversation, but worry apparently did strange things to people. Or it was just the Chunin exams. Strange things happened in them apparently. Soon enough though, Naruto felt the first of the arrival's moments before he saw them. If he had to guess, he'd say the Kumogakure proctors were using some kind of seal array for mass shunshin techniques between points. Only way to explain over a dozen signatures suddenly just appearing within his envelope roughly 30 feet away. When the doors were finally opened, they all caught sight of Guy's team. The two teenagers on stretchers made Naruto's heart drop into a pit. Lee 10-10! Guy stood up, looking ready to punch his way through anyone that tried to stop him before the medics carrying the two began to march over, not looking as though they were in any real rush. It's all right, sir, one kunoichi said. Both have been stabilized. What happened? Guy was rarely angry. In all his years, Naruto could remember seeing it only a handful of times, even at the worst of the war. But when he got to that point, heaven help anything in his way. He looked really close to crossing that line now, actually. Our IWA teammates dash, Niji snarled, marching up to them, stepping past the other proctors and genin. Tried to stab us in the back. IWA teammates! Guy questioned, aghast. Niji's lip was pulled back in a sneer as Tenten and Lee were carried away. The proctors disqualified them at least, and all of us passed. I will explain, but first I would like to. He gestured to himself, and the numerous scratches and tattered state of his clothes. Have an hour. May I? Guy didn't look pleased, but he looked to the proctor. You're certain they're all right? Both are suffering more from exhaustion than any real wounds except for your student Lee's leg, which he sprained. We actually sedated him because he wouldn't sit still long enough for us to put a splint on his leg properly. Naruto almost laughed. Yeah. That sounded like Lee. Just then, another bunch of signatures slipped into his field, and he felt his relief nearly swallow him as he instantly sensed his team, along with Kurenai's team. Both were all right. Their signatures showing no real abnormalities. Guy frowned, then sighed. All right. Go, Niji. Find me as soon as you're done. I expect a full report of what happened before dinner today. The Hyuga nodded. Yes, there they are. Naruto's shout interrupted him, though he really didn't mean to. His voice made everyone turn to look, even the teams that didn't belong to Konoha. As soon as Sasuke caught sight of him, and more importantly, the person next to him, his dark eyes nearly came out of their sockets. Itachi raised her hand and waved with her fingers, looking incredibly smug. Naruto noticed Gaara, Temari and Kankuro, each making their way out as well. Gaara was smiling, laughing with his siblings as he apparently teased Kankuro. Another difference to take note of then. A good one, he hoped. Kurenai stepped forward, apparently just as eager to see her team that was just behind Team 7, and Naruto had to physically resist the urge to run up to the three of them. With dignity well in hand, he waited for Sasuke, Sakura and Akane to come to him. He couldn't help but notice Akane and Sakura's somber expressions. What are you doing here? Were the words that Sasuke immediately blurted out, even as he marched right up to his sister and offered her a hug. Itachi ruffled his hair. Here to see you, of course. How did this portion of the exam go? Sasuke pulled away from her, looking up. His lips were pursed as his face scrunched up in frustration. I failed. The words came out of Akane's mouth. Her eyes were downcast to the floor, and the poor girl looked as though she was just barely keeping her tears in check. Sasuke and I passed, Sakura said, hands on Akane's shoulders as she pulled the girl close. The proctor said she didn't. Chapter 52. The teams were gathered, and brought before the Hokage that very night. From everything you're saying, it doesn't make sense. Tsunade was the one that spoke, her voice remarkably calm and level as she stroked her daughter's hair, fingers combing through the fiery red strands. They were in Sarutobi's hotel suite, that is to say, the apartments he had been gifted. He, Tsunade, and Orochimaru each had one. Decked out with every possible amenity, kitchen, living room, even a study. That's not even mentioning the monstrosity Kuta had been given. 3 times the size of these. They could probably fit the entire Konoha entourage of Genin comfortably in that place. Orochimaru hung about the edge of the room like a wraith, watching everything and everyone while Sarutobi used the largest chair by the unlit fireplace, because of course he did, looking at Guy, Kurenai and even Naruto with the 3 teams beside them. Sakura shifted from foot to foot as she spoke. That's what I said. She hedged, visibly trying not to fidget as Tsunade's calm eyes turned towards her. I was completely open for that puppet guy to take me out. Akane-chan saved me. If anyone should have gotten eliminated, it should have been me. Sarutobi leaned back in that lounge chair, breathing through his pipe, eyes closed seemingly in thought. He didn't even look at them as he responded. It is curious, but it is out of our hands, he finally said, adjusting his place in the seat. Don't worry, Akane-chan, he soothed, smiling as the girl looked to him. I failed my first Chunin exam too. It was a lie, Naruto knew, or at least, it would have been in his world. He wasn't sure now. But back in his time, Sarutobi had succeeded at every exam he'd undertaken, first try. The god of shinobi wasn't given that title out of pity or something. The Hokage turned his eyes away from the young girl and looked at Guy, Kurenai and their teams. Is that all that occurred? Yes, Hokage-sama, Guy was the one that answered. Sarutobi seemed to settle into a silence for a time, a contemplative one. And the Awagakure team was disqualified? Yes, sir. It was Niji who answered. They were actively cooperating with the enemy teams for the whole exam. It was my Byakugan and Tenten's traps that allowed us to, mostly, hide ourselves and the client the entire time. Impressive, he complimented. It is no wonder all three of you passed. Avoiding 4 enemy teams for 3 days is not an easy feat by any dash. He stopped, words ceasing as a knock at the door rolled through the apartment. With a twitch of his finger, a chakra string turned the knob and pulled open the door. Magajiro Kuta stepped through the door shadowed by Uchiha Itachi. And Naruto knew instantly, the daimyo was not supposed to be here. He wasn't wearing his usual robes of red, black and gold, rather the clothes of a worker, dark and nondescript. His hair and headdress were changed to a simple, if clean topknot, add the beard and Kuta looked like a common Joe and nothing more. The genin, as soon as they recognized him, all began to fall to their knees before Kuta stopped them mid-motion, hands outstretched and waving frantically. No. That's enough of that now. He smiled, holding on to Tenten's hands for a moment, and bringing her to her feet before reaching over and doing the same for Hinata. He even reached for Shino before the young man stood up on his own. We celebrate your successes tonight. He passes his eye over them, meeting each of their gazes as he says the next words. Promise. No bowing for now? He laughs. Kuta-sama. Sarutobi breathes, a puff of pipe smoke. We were not expecting you. They're lying, and judging by how Hinata and Niji toss each other a look, they know they're lying too. Whatever this is, it's theater. Ah. The daimyo huffs. I wanted to see the next generation of greatness for myself. Offer my congratulations in person. And your guard? Sarutobi asks. The ceremony of it all is tiring. They will be fine without me for a few hours. That's not how that's supposed to work. Tsunade's lips quirk in a smile. Kuta smiles back, then sees Akane. Oh, what's this now? Why these tears? I failed the exam. Akane repeated miserably. Oh, well, that can't be right. Ah. He suddenly gasped as he knelt in front of her. I know what we'll do. I will name you a chunin. How's that? You can't do that. Tsunade rolled her eyes, still stroking Akane's hair. I am Kutu. If I say she is a chunin, she is a chunin. He insisted. Tsunade's smile as she shook her head betrayed their little game. If it worked like that, I'd be married to your son. The man huffed, then offered a discreet wink to the red-headed girl. All right, Tsunade, you win. Naruto felt himself tuning out the words, tuning out the distractions. He didn't listen. He watched. There's something here, some little dance that he's not privy to. Guy and Karina, I can tell. Guy's a little slow on the uptake, but he's getting there. And then the show, or whatever it was over, just like that. With little more than a word from Sarutobi. I suppose that's all you have to report then. He stood up from his chair, smiling kindly at the assembled children. Pass or fail, you have all represented the village well. I hereby grant you official leave for the next 3 days to do with as you will. Giving his pipe another puff, he looked to Guy, Karina and himself. Sensei, please stay behind for now to finalize a few details. With a clear dismissal, the genin teams marched out of the apartments towards their own hotel rooms. Naruto offered a smile and a nod to Sasuke and Sakura, while Tsunade kissed the top of Akane's head and patted her on the back as she left. They closed the door behind them, and the atmosphere changed. It was subtle, as it was blatant, the fading smiles, the tension in the air, the poignant, heavy silence. Surprisingly, it wasn't Kutu or Sarutobi that broke the silence. It was Tsunade. Neither of you were surprised. The eyes of everyone in the room collectively turned to her, as she looked to Sarutobi, and to Orochimaru out of the corner of her eye. When Akane said she'd failed, neither of you were surprised, not even disappointed. No, we weren't, Sarutobi answered. It took Naruto a second to catch up. Did you rig the exam? Yes. The old man answered with not a hint of remorse or regret, looking to Naruto. Even if we were to ignore the issue of her age, the fact remains that the risk of her discovery as a Jinchuriki is simply too high. Her training is nowhere near complete, and you are uniquely qualified to continue to oversee it. The blonde blinked, looking around the room. Guy and Karina showed nothing on pointedly neutral faces while Orochimaru watched him carefully, and Kuta busied himself with finding a drink. Tsunade's eyes were trained down to a spot on the floor. Is the whole exam rigged? He had to ask. No. Failing a student is simple. A whispered word here, a payment there. Numbers are arranged and the failure is up to the Chunin examiners. Passing someone, as you know, does not occur until the final public portion of the exams. If a student performed exceptionally well, or horribly in public view, we could hardly tweak things to suit our preferences. Your team's success was and will be their own, Sarutobi assured. Naruto crossed his arms. He didn't really know how to feel about that. Doesn't seem right, he finally said. He could feel Itachi's eyes at his back even as Sarutobi brought the full weight of his stare down on him. Tell me, truthfully, is she ready to be a chunin, check, and mate? Naruto's lips pursed. This is for the best, Naruto-kun, he said in that voice that always made him sound like he was completely right. The old man looked away. Regardless, there is another matter, far more important than the exams that we all need to discuss. Itachi-san, if you would. The sound of ruffling clothes behind him, a step, then another, and she was standing at his side, looking to Kurenai, Guy, Orochimaru, and Tsunade before finally settling on him. I have not come here to see my brother's participation in the Chunin exams as I previously stated. She is here because I am to be assassinated. Kutu's calm, droll voice made each of them blink in surprise, turning their eyes to the daimyo as he made his way towards an empty chair beside the quiet Tsunade. He took a sip of whatever drink he'd gotten his hands on, bottle in one hand, saucer in the other. Itachi-chan here has discovered Iwagakure is, as we speak, preparing an ambush to attack us on the return to the capital. In summation, Itachi drawled. Those are the broad strokes. They would be violating the Chunin exam truce, Guy said. No, they wouldn't. It was Orochimaru that answered him, finally speaking up from his corner of the room. The Chunin exam truce has always revolved around the host of the exams. Whomever is hosting the exams can't plot to attack anyone, and while you're within the borders of the hosting party you cannot attack anyone. It was as much as could be agreed on at the end of the last Great War. Frankly, it was all that was necessary. The borders of all the 5 great nations are fairly vast, and in order for you to attack another party on their return trip you would need an exceeding amount of resources and, frankly, luck. You would have to avoid border patrols for weeks from possibly multiple nations, and determine accurately what route home the person you wish to attack is going to take. Not to mention that the sort of entourages that come to the exams are under heavy guard. The Kage, the daimyo, and other important diplomats and nobles. The impossibility of logistics has made this sort of attack impractical more effectively than any treaty. So what makes this different? Kurenai asked, arms crossing under her chest. IWA has found a way to narrow our possible routes home, Itachi said. They've allied with a group from Amigekure. Naruto felt his breath catch. No. AIM is miles away from Kumo's border. Tsunade sighed, running a hand through her hair. To the northwest of Konoha, we're on the northeast. That doesn't really narrow our routes home over much. It does if they flood the northeastern riverlands and wetlands with rainwater, Itachi pointed out, marching over to a nearby table as she reached into her satchel. You're saying they have something that can alter the weather? Guy gasped. But that's dash, it's not impossible. Naruto cut him off, staring at Itachi's back. I've seen seal designs that can be used. You need a lot of chakra. But you can do it. Itachi nodded, though she didn't turn to look at him. Uzumaki's right. With that tool available to them, it will cut our possible routes back to Konoha and to the capital to just a handful of accessible passages. From there, it will be a simple matter to spring an ambush at any of them. She pulled out a map of the continent. The northwestern portion had writing on it. Through what I've gathered, and what research I've done, I've determined the 3 most likely sites of this ambush. Spreading it out across the table, she flattened it out and stepped back to let the others look. Sarutobi marched over, trailing pipe smoke as he came close, overseeing the 3 coordinates. How did you reach these conclusions? A mixture of logistical realities, study of the flooding history in these lands, and of course, listening in while I was still in AIM. Did you learn what exactly IWA promised them? Getting an alliance with AIM is notoriously difficult for anyone. Tsunade asked from where she sat. IWA doesn't have an alliance with AIM, not really. AIM is a conglomeration of nearly a dozen loosely affiliated tribes and communities all living within the ruins of their scrap pile of a city. Itachi corrected as she shook her head. What IWA got was an arrangement with 1 or 2 of those clans or groups. Why do we not send word to Konoha? Kurenai suddenly asked. The Chunin exams aren't over for a month. We can easily get word to them, and meet an escort at A-, because I do not wish it. Kutu interrupted, bringing Kurenai's shocked gaze to him. Staring at the red-eyed Genjutsu mistress where he still sat, Kuta took a breath through his nostrils. Even if I did. Do you not remember the warning we received when we arrived? How do you expect the Reikage will react when he hears word that we're gathering strength in Konoha for an operation in the middle of the Chunin exam? How do you believe IWA will react? Will they sit passively by and wait? Or will they try to gain another ally by spinning this in their favor? The reality stands. We may have gained the military victory, but to outsiders and other villages, we and IWA both look like we're not to be trusted. We cannot allow you to walk into this trap just because of Kumogakure's threats. She protested. Nothing has been decided yet. Sarutobi answered. The reason the three of you were brought up to speed on these matters is because we need for you to be aware of it in order to prepare both yourselves and your students. They are not training just for an exam this time. As such, none of them will cease training in this month. Competition or no. The three of them shared a look, eyes meeting with a very real, mutual, anxious and urgent fear rushing through them. The Sandaime wasn't asking them to prepare their students for an exam. He was demanding they prepare their students for a battle. Guy, the eldest of them, was the one to answer for all of them. Understood. Hokage-sama. It took hours. Longer than he liked, but he could be patient. When he finally had a moment alone with her, the words were out of his mouth in an instant. Is it pain? Nagato? I'm not sure. She answered truthfully, tossing a look over her shoulder. I do know that the AIM ninja were confident in the rain being there and being enough to flood. It will rain in just a few days, and it won't stop for the entire month. Naruto closed his eyes, lowering his head just a bit. Yeah. Nagato. It had to be. Nagato was Jiraiya's student. Just how different would he be without Jiraiya around to train him? Would Konan be there? And the other guy, Yahiko, was he still be alive? Did he have the Rinnegan? Or was that gone too? Too many questions, not enough answers. I know, she said. He hadn't realized he'd spoken aloud. She turned him, the dark hallway casting her eyes in shadow before she knelt. He was a little taller than her now when she did that. Before, she could look at him at perfect eye level. If it is him, and if the force IWA brings is significant. She trailed off. He knew what she meant. He sighed, scratching the back of his head. I'll be ready. I won't let them kill Kutu or my friends. You know that. She nodded. These are thoughts for another time, though, she said. For now you dash, yeah? He smiled a bit. We got an exam to win. Chapter 53. The mountain air was cold and harsh, like a bucket of ice water dumped on your head in the early morning. Why? Sakura panted, gulping down air, a visible sheen of sweat beginning to mark her brow. Why am I so tired? She wheezed. We haven't even started. The air is thinner up here. Naruto answered her, smiling, hands clasped behind his head. It takes a while for your body to acclimatize. As they reached the top of the path and crested the hill onto a plateau, Team 7 was treated to another grand view of the snow-capped peaks, the chilly mountain air now making their breath fog in front of their mouths ever so lightly. There was someone waiting for them. Itachi? Sasuke gasped. His sister's languid, dark stare turned to him, one eye opening from where she'd been apparently taking something of a cat nap, dark cloak pulled on the floor beneath her for bedding and a knapsack serving as a pillow. Don't look so surprised, little brother. Makes me think you haven't been keeping up with your detection exercises. The youngest Uchiha winced. He actually had been neglecting the tedious meditation exercises. What are you doing here? She held up 2 fingers. I'll give you 2 guesses, but if you need more than one, I'm disowning you. You're gonna help Naruto-sensei train us? Sakura asked, blinking in surprise. Itachi had gotten a reputation as a prodigy, even outside the Uchiha clan. The fact that she and Naruto ran in the same circles at all was a surprise. Nope. It was, surprisingly, Naruto that answered, hands grasping his friends by their shoulders as he wiggled between them. She isn't helping me train you. She is training you. Why? The rapid-fire question shot out of Sakura's lips, wide-eyed, incredulous and more than a little hurt by the statement. Naruto smiled apologetically, turning both of them to the side, to look at Akane who had been behind them. Akane isn't taking the exam right now, he said, but she still needs to learn some things. And she needs to learn them fast. The young girl gasped. Naruto, no. She demanded, hands rising in front of her as if to ward him off. It's okay, you can just train me after the Chunin dash. He shook his head. Not an option. He looked to his two teammates / students / friends, the both of whom he still had his arms around. Look, Itachi-chan is a lot stronger than me. I'm not exactly leaving you with some no-name here. She'll do a much better job than I would. And you're the only one that can train Akane. Sasuke crossed his arms, lip curling in displeasure. Because she's a Jinchuriki. You're not preparing her for the future exam, are you? A silence fell over the training grounds. Naruto sighed, closing his eyes. Sasuke, that is a secret and a very dangerous one. Just because it looks like we're alone. Don't trust it. He warned, and the young Uchiha had the decency to look suitably chastised for his mistake. But yes. The blonde finally answered after a moment. You guys are more than ready for any exam, and Itachi is gonna make sure you guys are beyond ready. There's no one I'd trust more for this. Sakura still looked conflicted, but Sasuke turned to his sister. I guess I'll finally get that promised fire jutsu out of you after so many years. The elder sibling scoffed where she lay. Don't count on it. With a flick of a finger, a tiny pebble sailed across the training ground to smack Sasuke in the forehead, much to his visible irritation. As he rubbed the already red spot, Naruto smiled. Then, releasing his two teammates, he walked over to Akane. Now, Akane-chan. There was something odd about the report you guys gave about the previous portion of the exam. So you and I are gonna try something, but I want to do it where Itachi can see. Okay? The red-headed girl nodded. Okay, good. He smiled, trying to bleed as much reassurance in the expression as possible before turning to look at Itachi out of the corner of his eye. She nodded. He looked back to the girl. Akane-chan, you remember how you hit that Kankuro kid from Suna? Haltingly, she nodded. Okay. I want you to try to punch me, as hard as you can. I'm gonna be moving. But I want you to land one good hit with all your strength. Okay? She looked confused, probably due to the emphasis. She and Naruto had spared many times, she'd never held back before. She'd also never come close to winning before. Okay. She took her fighting stance. Naruto opened up, hand moving lightning fast, brushing his fingers across the bridge of her nose. Where brows met forehead, she reeled as he grinned. She pounced. She was always fast. Months and months of training her taijutsu had made her even faster. She didn't add any fire techniques, but her form had nary a flaw, even with limbs that were still slightly too short. It took a second for Sasuke to notice. It took Sakura a little bit longer. He wasn't blocking. Naruto was using every trick they'd seen from him so far, and a few they hadn't yet, to keep one step ahead of the girl, fluidly dancing between her attacks as she tried her hardest to hit him. She would kick, he would lean back, she tried to sweep at his legs, he would jump. When she punched, quick sidesteps, pivots and slides would carry him out of reach. He looked completely boneless, flexible and impossible to catch. It went like this for almost a full minute. Stop. The barked command made the two genin jump, trailing their eyes back over their shoulders to Itachi. She nodded to Naruto. You were right. She drolly answered. Naruto grinned, much to the genin's confusion. Huh. Right about what dash? Look at the ground. Itachi demanded. Thoroughly confused now, all the children did so. Perhaps it was his keen eyesight that let him notice it first, but once he did, he couldn't unsee it, and his eyes went wide. What the hell dash, they're chakra marks? Like when you put too much chakra into your foot when running up a tree. Naruto answered, seemingly giddy. See, for months now, Akane's, friend, has been saying that he's been organizing the furniture. You truly are abysmal at doublespeak. Itachi closed her eyes, seemingly in physical pain at listening to him. The blonde stuck out his tongue. Shush! He demanded. Anyway, we didn't know what he was planning. I mean, of course there's Akane's skill at fire techniques, but there had to be something more that he was doing. This nails it. The exam with Kankuro and now these chakra marks. He noticed how Tsunade-chan manipulates her chakra to give her strength while Akane was still in the womb, and just manipulated things so she can do the same without any conscious effort. Wait. Sakura blinked. First, they can do that? Second, just to be clear, you're actually saying Akane-chan has Tsunade-sama's legendary strength? Her eyes rounded on the young girl who was busy trying to look at the ground, her feet and her hands all at once. Naruto smiled. Yup. If I was right, I really didn't want a dislocated shoulder, ruptured whatever, or broken something else, so I asked Itachi-chan to keep an eye on outward signs while I focused on dodging, just in case I missed something. The chakra marks are a sure sign though. Her whole body is channeling chakra as she just uses punches and kicks. It's not as pinpoint perfect as Tsunade-chan, hence why she's leaving chakra marks at all. So I don't think he's arranged the furniture to that point yet, but in a few months you'll definitely be there if he keeps it up. Naruto. Sasuke hesitated, looking from him to Akane. Shouldn't you be, a little more worried for her? I mean, this isn't actually arranging furniture. This is manipulating her biology. That's a big deal. Naruto waved him off. They can forget more than we'll ever know about chakra manipulation. How do you think Gaara controls sand like it's second nature dash? That guy's a dash. Itachi's hand covered Sakura's mouth before she could voice the question, glaring with eyes like flint knives at Naruto, who cringed and seemed to wilt in on himself. You, she growled, should stop talking. Naruto nodded, shifting a bit to hide behind Akane, absurd as that was. That's why you didn't want us to fight him, Sasuke said. Naruto offered a small, nervous laugh. Yeah. That, and I really thought he'd be a lot worse. Temperament-wise. Sasuke shrugged, taking a deep breath. So you're saying this is normal? At least for this particular. He paused. Condition? Yeah. Naruto nodded, looking back to the young girl. It really is a symbiotic relationship if you let it be that. The team seemed to fall into silence before it was, ironically, broken by Itachi. The young hunter Nin cleared her throat. There will be time to discuss details later. For now we all have a lot of work ahead of us. Sasuke, Sakura, follow me. Naruto, get her ready. With no further pomp or ceremony, Itachi turned and began marching off in a different direction, just like that. Sakura's head swiveled around a little, apparently torn on something, before she quickly jogged over to Akane, offering the girl a hug and a kiss on the head. We'll talk more later, Akane-chan, she promised to the hesitantly smiling girl. Sasuke offered no hugs or kisses, but a single firm nod, a small smile and a wave as he turned and followed his sister, leaving the two of them. Akane watched them leave until they were gone from her view, before turning to Naruto. The blonde knelt in front of her, taking a breath. All right, Akane-chan. There are a few things that you, as a Jinchuriki, are gonna have to learn. You want to know what the first and most important thing is, hun? She nodded. Naruto held up a slip of paper with a sealed design on it, smiling brightly. The most important skill for a Jinchuriki is communication. The world was spread out before him. Snow-capped peaks towering over gray crags and deep ravines. The land was beautiful and harsh all at once. Kuta breathed deep through his nose, feeling the brisk, cold wind invade his system. Summer was starting, but here in the mountains it still felt like winter's chill. The balcony was wide, larger than it had any right to be for the estate of one person, with large plush chairs and tables where people could gather. It looks more like the lounge of a resort than a private estate. Kuta-sama. The daimyo turns, a look over his shoulder to reveal one of his guards. Sir? Hokage Sarutobi-sama is here to speak with you. Kuta nods. Let him pass. He crosses his arms as he hears the man pound one fist against his chest and bow at the waist. He walks away. Kuta hears his steps as he walks out the door, the sound of footsteps, the smell of pipe weed and smoke, the sound of a sliding door closing behind him. Hiruzen. He smiled to himself. Don't you have a great many things to attend to? The question is rhetorical. They're both well aware of their current responsibilities. Sarutobi ignored his query, breathing out a cloud of smoke that billowed through the air as he marched forward to stand beside him. I have confirmed it as best I could. Itachi-san's report? A nod, the large brim hat of the Hokage shadowing the man's eyes. Indeed. Our scouts have seen AIM moving, and our spies report on Iwa's preparations. Kuta clasped his hands behind his back. Any specifics on who or how many they'll be sending? None yet. Though I imagine the entire IWA delegation here could also serve quite adequately as an assassination team. Kuta nodded, eyes closed, scrunched really as though in pain. I was thinking the same. The Tsuchikage, his Umbu-guard, the Jounin sensei. All of these can serve. You left one out of your list, Sarutobi accused, little subtlety in the statement. Kuta couldn't help it, he laughed, a full-bellied laugh as he threw his head back for a moment. You must truly be angry about Kuratsuchi, my old friend, to speak like that. By all reports she is at least a highly skilled jounin. Perhaps as good as Mato Gai or Kakashi, skills she has due to your insistence that she be trained. Sarutobi took a long drag of his pipe. She may kill many before she is dealt with. She might even be the one to kill me. The daimyo laughed. There was a pause between the two men, heavy and pregnant with many things unsaid. This is nothing to laugh about. There was an edge to his voice, something there, held in restraint. And yet I am the daimyo. So I laugh at whatever I wish. The man answered. There was the sound of a sliding door, the brush of slippered feet on wood. Kutu turned and marched over towards the nearby table. Tea, Hiruzen? I hear Kumo's brews are especially good. A flash of some emotion passed through the old man's face. Kuta looks at him. There is irritation there. He is not a man that finds people dismissing him, or treating matters lightly. If Sarutobi could order him into compliance right now, he no doubt would. But he couldn't. Because Kutu, not Hiruzen, was the daimyo. He served himself his tea as the servant slipped away. I will say it again. Sarutobi drawled. We do not have the manpower to protect you adequately. You should leave for the capital at once. And I will answer again. Have me leave now and you risk Kumo and Kiri thinking us vulnerable. He answered, pouring himself his drink and setting the kettle down. They will think worse if you are killed. Then I won't be killed. He said it as though that alone made it law. As if his words alone carried some kind of shield as he looked at the disapproving face of the Hokage. I will not leave, he declared, a tone of finality in his words. Now, do you not have a great many things to attend to? Or would you like to join me for tea? He gestured to the seat as Hiruzen closed his eyes. With your permission, I will leave now, Magajiro Dano. He did not bow.